Засвіт стали, означенники похід ночі. Заплакала Марсинька свої ясні очі. Заплакала Марсинька свої ясні очі. Не плач, Марсинька, не плач, не журися, краще засвомила, батько вишньому молися, краще засвомила, Богу помолися. Світить місяць над водою, а сонця немає. Мати сина в дороженьку слізно проводжає. Мати сина в дороженьку слізно проводжає. Іди, мій синочку, іди, не варися. За 4 неділинки додому вернися. За 4 неділинки додому вернися. Ой, хто знає, чи же вернусь, що в яку годину приймеш мою ж Марусеньку, як рідну дитину. Приймеш мою ж Марусеньку, як рідну дитину, як рідну дитину. Ой, рад би ж я, Марусеньку, ще раніше взяти, та чи ж будеш вона ж мене, синку, шанувати? Синку, шанувати. Не плач, не плач, не журиться, хто не впадайте, заграбники, ворониники, назад сподівайтесь. Ой, прилучку, прилучку, при широкім полі, при великім табуні, кінь гуляв поволі, при великім табуні, кінь гуляв поволі. Ой, піймаю, заплутаю, шовковою моздою, ой, піймаю, заплутаю, шовковою моздою. Ой, лети, мій коню, та й вихрем несися, проти милої двора, станом становися, проти милої двора, станом становися. Не плач, Марусенька, не плач, не журися, краще за свого милого Богу помолися, краще за свого милого вишньому молися. Без благословіння матері та батька козак ніколи не ступав і кроку. Тому шануйте батьків своїх. Де б вони не були, що б вони не робили, то не ваша справа, то ваша доля. Але батьки від Бога. І біля їхніх стіп двері до раю. Тож будьте з собою, будьте людьми, і буде у вас все гаразд. Батько нас ніколи не полишає. Козацьке слово даю. Най буде.
Hello, hello, hello. I hope you're all doing well. It is Friday, 6:52 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at 3:52 a.m. p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and 1:52 a.m. here. You're all doing well. So there's been a lot of bombing lately, and I've been all over the country. And when I mean all over the country, I mean in two places, which translates to all over in my head, at least in this moment. And in Odessa, it was not great. And what I mean by it was not great is that since I had a place in the city, and for at least one of the nights, we were located pretty close to where there was a decent amount of port infrastructure. It was very clear that the Russians were trying to attack that port infrastructure, and it was very, very loud. The attack was very big, and some people did die. And filming that, not the port infrastructure, you can't film the port infrastructure there, but just filming, you know, the bombing from inside this little it's not like an Airbnb, it's like a local thing, but the equivalent of I want to rent this place out for a few days for like a vacation home type situation, and having the building shake while trying to sleep kept me up, and man, I woke up at 3 a.m. for all of the Navy embeds I wanted to do, and the Navy embeds worked out great. The anti-air embeds, maybe not as much, you would say like interesting action footage or whatever, but you know, some good interviews. But for the entirety of the time we were there, the air threat was very present. The last day when we were leaving, there was a strike, I think maybe a half a mile to a mile away. I would say probably like half to, you know, 3/4 of a mile. And it was a ballistic missile strike. And, you know, you could feel the wave in your chest, and you could feel it in your eardrums. And man, the smoke, like we went out to this because we were trying to have like breakfast. And so I drank the compote. I got up, I looked out down the street, I saw smoke rising from the street, realized that whatever it was, probably couldn't film it anyway. Went back down and then continued eating breakfast. I actually ordered chicken and rice, spicy chicken and rice, as spicy as you can get in this country with the type of palates that are here. But Bogdan, he ordered beef stroganoff, and as he's apparently like allergic to vegetables, Bogdan's my fixer. I ended up having to eat his mushroom beef stroganoff. It was okay though. Just wish I had my chicken and rice. So let's get into some news, because there is news we have to cover outside of just, how bad it's been in Odessa, including the news about how bad it's been in Kyiv when it comes to strikes and the lack of air defense. My goodness. Of course, we're also going to talk about the big, beautiful bill. It passed, and we haven't really done a really in-depth section on it, so I do want to talk about that later. Elon suggested a third party pretty openly, flaunting around some interesting polling, saying that the majority of Americans want Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, to start a third party, despite his, not fantastic approval ratings. I color me suspicious, but I do want to show it as the Elon Trump rift reawakens, and has been quite entertaining for me as the big, beautiful bill is finally rammed through the Senate, back into the House, and passed. And now goes to President Trump's desk to be signed for this July 4th. And by the way, happy July 4th. Wish we had more positive news for July 4th. I think we have a few, positive stories, but mostly just trying to catch up on the news for all the time I missed in Odessa. And of course, this air attack, which was not great in Kyiv. We'll get into that in a bit. We're also under air alert right now. I can show this on screen quick. The air alert Kyiv map. Here you go. We're under air alert. I heard anti-air teams working as I was setting up in studio. I've heard some shaheeds going over my apartment before I came over to the studio. So the Russians are attacking with shaheeds in Kyiv City, in the Kyiv region, and are probably going through the Sumy route from the look of this map. Because when I was in Sumy with air defense teams, and we just released my documentary from my in bed with the Sumy air defense teams, Sumy region is basically a highway for the Russians. It's a highway for Russian drones. They use it as a pathway to get into Chernihiv. They use it to get into Kiev region. They use it to get into Western Ukraine when they want to get into Western Ukraine. Of course, they can fire ballistic missiles from the south, from from Crimea. They can fire ballistic missiles from Russia. But the Sumy region is one of their big. I mean, it really is a highway for drones. Morally corrupt, bankrupt man, which to me means that they should be investing a lot of air defense teams into the Sumy region, a lot of air defense work into the Sumy region. And from the time I was there, that seems to be the case. Because when I was standing out in those fields, it felt like anytime there were drones in the area, like half the sky lit up. That doesn't mean, of course, that they couldn't be using better equipment than whatever their grandfather was using in 1928. In reference to the DP-27. But, if it works, it works, even on occasion. Happy Independence Day. Stay strong for America and Ukraine. Thank you, Kevin Campbell. Oh, Bombsheller gifted 10 bankrupt, not 10 bankrupt shells. 10 gifted subs. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. I didn't know who did it. I didn't want to stop myself, lose my train of thought. Man. To Gareth, KP, homeschool historian, John, War Thunder, Lefty. I wonder what you like to play. Theodore Elways, The Very Hungry Singularity, CK, Minecraft Gaming, again, a mystery, what you play, and Marlins Monk. Thank you, Bombsheller. I appreciate that. BB, a big supporter of the channel, always. Not Netanyahu, but Bombsheller. Okay, so I did want to actually, I forgot I had some footage. Bankrupt man. I have some footage from Odessa for everything I was talking about how bad the bombing was there. And this started at 3 a.m. Okay, it didn't even morally corrupt, bankrupt man. It didn't even start at 3 a.m. I just woke up at 3 a.m. and couldn't sleep anymore. Even though we had an in-bed with the Navy after, which, if you're interested in that, I do have pictures of it. 1 second. Where is it? Where are my Navy pictures? Finally, my natural evolution. In the Navy. Yeah, there it is. Morally corrupt. It was very interesting. These are basically boats in Odessa that work on the water, shooting down the shaheeds as they come in. They also do sea demining work because the Russians have put a lot of sea mines to, at the very least, if they're not going to disrupt the grain corridor, raise the insurance prices. And I got to interview the captain of the ship, the deputy captain. I got to interview the gunner. I got to interview somebody who's in command of multiple ships. So somebody who's of, a higher command structure of not only the ship, but I believe it was 8 ships, a certain amount of ships. And I got to learn a lot about it. And it's really interesting being out there. That thing is fast. This is actually a Swedish ship. This is a Swedish patrol boat that they've retrofitted with a Browning M2 machine gun that actually shot down a shaheed that morning before they talked to me during this attack right here. So this was taken from like our apartment we were using while we were there. Really, one of the big threat is not only these things not going for the port infrastructure. Of course, there's people working on the port. They got killed and they got hurt, but you know, it's these things. These sheets when they get intercepted, they can hit civilian homes. They have hit civilian homes in Odessa before. Everyone expects them to continue to hit civilian homes.
Burns is an
Immoral, morally corrupt, bankrupt man. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Ray Lindsay, and I think Chamberlain subbed at a tier 2. Tier 2, my gosh, not tier 1, tier 2. And it's pretty bad there. Again, this is the type of stuff people have to sleep through. And it went on all night. I could not get a lick of sleep.
Immoral, morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
That one shook the house a little bit. That one shook the house a tiny bit. Hey, General Mark, I appreciate that. Thank you. Oh, and that air defense team for Sumi about that drone highway. I released that documentary over the weekend on Saturday. It's an anti-Shaheed cowboy documentary. These guys are cowboys. They rodeo the Shaheeds down. It's just about 40 minutes long, roughly 40 minutes long. So you get a lot of detail on how these teams operate. It's talked about directly from the soldiers themselves. They explain their operations. They're mostly locals to the area that they're defending. We did get to film a down Shaheed. We got to film them firing at the Shaheeds. We got to film VR training programs. We got interviews with multiple anti-air teams. We embedded with them overnight multiple times. I even went to the Chernihiv Oblast and I did a whole thing over there. And because of just how difficult it is to film sometimes with these and try to get footage of them operating, because it's not like the Russians are going to tell you what path you have in advance. There's so many nights of me just spending day after day after day, like basically getting footage that amounted to nothing. I just came back from Odessa, like I just said multiple times earlier, but reiterating again for all of the people coming in here like turtles, a little slow. And when I was over there, we filmed with the air defense teams on the ground, and it was more on the countryside, and the Russians seem to just be going to the port over and over and over again. It's not just the port infrastructure, but mostly port infrastructure. So a lot of those teams out there in the countryside, along the sea cliffs and, not directly in the city or near the city defending the ports, they just you don't really get footage of them operating that often because those are not the routes that the Russians take. But you still want to keep them covered because you have decent amount of civilians over there. You have towns and communities over there, and the Russians every once in a while will take routes you're not expecting, or a lot of times the Shaheeds will change trajectory in midair or something. So it's very difficult work. Here's a little trailer for it. The documentary has already been released on the main channel. Work.
Bye.
Okay. After they get an alert that there's Shaheeds in the area, how much time do they have to get to a position?
30 секунд. Чоловік підійшов, заводить машину, виїжджає, ми слідом беремо речі, які нам треба взяти з собою. Пулемет же ж на машині, по суті. Що там, кнопку нажав, прожектор теж підключив, то теж він вже працює в стані.
Наша на даний момент основна робота – це захист неба над містом Суми, який кожного дня та особливо ночі атакує ворог. Тобто ми стоїмо, захищаємо небо. Тут проживають наші сім'ї, наші родини, звичайно, що мотивують.
Как, что не долетел, людей не покалечил? Это жизни людские. Мог бы где-то на 9-этажку. Это российские убийцы.
Anyway, that's available right now on YouTube for anybody who wants to learn a little bit more about Ukrainian air defense. Preferably when I'm not streaming, because I do appreciate your viewership. Everybody out there. Hey, Blomscheller. A $50 donation. My goodness, you're really going out tonight. Bombsheller's always throwing the big stacks in chat. 1 second, let me read this. Stay safe. Sending bunches of love and prayers attached to the bucks from BB, not BB. Thank you, appreciate that. Okay. So, should we go straight into the air attack since, that's you know, what I've experienced most directly firsthand, I think that would probably be easiest. We can actually, you know what? Quick warm up, okay? Because I don't want to do a full segment on this because I feel like I'm in, you know, I'm in time machine racism territory with some of this, or in this instance, anti-Semitism. Donald Trump, for whatever reason, and this was a Biden thing too. So this is an old politician thing. This isn't just a Trump problem. Though Trump's not gonna apologize like Biden did. This is like an old anti-Semitism problem. This is dusty anti-Semitism. Okay, not that weird edit anti-Semitism you're gonna get in the Ron DeSantis vibe edits on Twitter. Shylock was the term he used.
Has donated $100.
Whoa.
Here's one piece of good news for your July 4th. Thanks for continuing to give a voice to Ukrainians, Dylan. Stay safe.
My goodness, $100. A Money 515, true to his name, drops $100 in the chat as I'm condemning Donald Trump for anti-Semitism. I appreciate that. And I will say, conspiracy theories abound. Conspiracy theories abound. I appreciate the ADL check. It's very appreciated. I mean, I appreciate the independent donation. It's extremely appreciated. But the Shylock thing, it's just so over the top. We'll play a little bit of his like speech around it because I'm not taking this out of context, but plus also just a check on Trump's I guess you could say state, his current mental acuities.
We've saved our country. We've got the hottest country anywhere in the world, as said by...
You've won me over, man. Okay, I was against them, but I hadn't thought about it that way. The hottest country ever.
Many, many leaders of other countries.
So hot, so sexy.
And we will ignite trillions of dollars in economic growth, increase take-home pay for the typical family by more than $10,000 a year. And very importantly for Iowa, this bill rescues over 2 million family farms from the so-called estate tax or the death tax. In other words, before Trump, you were losing farms to the banks. Before Trump, you were losing the farms like nobody's ever seen before. You love your children. You don't feel so well. You pass away. You leave everything to your children, and they have to pay a big estate tax or a death tax, as we call it. And they couldn't do it. They go out and borrow money, and all of a sudden the bank is foreclosing on the farm. Not going to happen. You have no more estate tax. You have no more death tax to pay. Now, that's if you love your children. If you don't love your children, it doesn't matter. Just forget about what I said. Not going to help you. But if you love them, or if you love somebody that you're leaving it to, think of that. No death tax, no estate tax, no going to the banks and borrowing.
You know what's sick is when you're talking about these rural families that he's trying to speak to by talking about, hey, the estate tax is so terrible because of how it could affect farm inheritance and the taxing upon property in large estates once one dies. So if you are a large farm owner, the possibility of there being taxation with the property being handed over. And the same bill that he's being talked about, the reason called the big beautiful bill is there's so much stuff in it. If you like that, even if you like that in the crowd, even though this is, yeah, it's a tax cut that largely favors the wealthy, which most of the tax cuts in this the big beautiful bill largely did. Even if you like that, in this bill, because it's the big beautiful bill, covers so much, you also got rural farm hospital cuts. They're going to get funding cuts, and that means they're going to pull back operations. And some of these rural hospitals are likely going to shut down. And so if you are needing to get services from this rural hospital and you have, like, I don't know, like a stroke out in the countryside in one of these isolated communities, your next point of medical service could now be an extra 2 to 3 hours away. And when I look at this crowd, I do not see a crowd full of, how you would say, extremely wealthy individuals. And while there are people who are very wealthy that likes Trump because of their tax cuts, they're not the ones that would typically go to a rally like this. And I'm really wondering, once these rural farm hospital cuts, once these Medicaid cuts, because of bureaucratic overburdens, starts to hit working people that have a lot of the poorer working people who have moved over to the Trump coalition, I don't know. It's going to be rough. It's going to be rough come 2026.
From, in some cases, a fine banker, and in some cases, Shylocks and bad people. But they took away a lot of family. They destroyed a lot of families. But we did the opposite. So just remember, to me, it's so important.
You just throw Shylock out there like crazy. Just boom. Like bad banker, bad people. He had already put in a bad descriptor, but he just couldn't stop him. So just whoosh, whoosh. Anyway, I was wondering what the ADL was going to say, because they did condemn Biden, and then Biden went out there and publicly apologized during his presidency. They did release a statement saying the term Shylock evokes a centuries-old anti-Semitic trope about Jews and greed that is extremely offensive and dangerous. President Trump's use of the term is very troubling and irresponsible, and undermines how lies and conspiracies, and underscores how lies and conspiracies about Jews remain deeply entrenched in our country. Words from our leaders matter, and we expect more from the President of the United States. Trump does not care. Trump does not care. You think the ADL called me mean? I'm sorry to the Jews. That's not. I'm sorry. It's not happening. Nope. But I mean, it's good that the ADL was consistent here. I honestly was a little worried, just due to the public pressure campaign Trump tends to put on these on organizations that come out and condemn him in any manner about what they were going to do. But it's good. Okay, I think it's time to talk about the air attack. So, I released a segment on my second channel that I recorded while coming back from Odessa, where I was filming for the majority of the week, which is why I wasn't streaming. And as we were coming back, and it was pretty loud in Odessa for my time there, very loud. Definitely when we were a little bit closer to the port. And not later when we were in a different location that still had like drones flying over it, but not targeting the stuff that we were much closer to before. We came back, and I knew that it was going to be not great in Kyiv, because there's been a lot of big air attacks in Kyiv as of late, but we had another record-breaking attack, and this comes after a series of events that I can only say is diplomatically making the United States look not only weak, but also like a terrible ally. And as a nation state that's supposed to have a defense industry that can produce quite a bit, they're kind of slipping up here and either revealing that we have a national security crisis that is mission critical, or Ukraine's being thrown under the bus. And this really only seems like the two options here, and I'm going to get to why. But let's start at the start of the story. Let's start at the start. Hexas halted weapons for Ukraine despite military analysis that the aid wouldn't jeopardize U.S. readiness. So I talked about this during the report we already released, but the Trump administration has halted Patriots. They have halted artillery shell shipments, 155 millimeter artillery shells. They've halted some guided rockets and GMLRS systems, GMLRS rockets that are fired from MLRS systems. They've blocked a lot of mission critical aid for the Ukrainian armed forces and for Ukrainian air defense. And they didn't just block it, they blocked it as it was in Poland, getting ready to get shipped over the border. As it was getting ready to be moved over the border, some of it already in trucks. So that happened with zero warning to Kyiv, obviously upsetting many people in the country, many of the people that I've been talking to over the last 48 hours. And the explanation given as leaks started to come out that the Undersecretary of State, Elbridge Colby, was extremely influential in this decision, and that Pete Hegseth had actually tried to do this on multiple other occasions, but had been reversed as that was coming out, with the only defense being, look, we're just too low in supply and we have to do a review. And so this is necessary for a review. As they were giving that explanation that we were just so mission critical when it came to this supply, that the one nation state that needs this most desperately in our long list of allies, with the Iranians for the moment quite weakened and probably and not in a position to go on any large scale air offensive through the medium to short term, and with the Taiwanese not currently in, well, a state of war with the Chinese, the Ukrainians are the American ally that most desperately needs these air defense systems. And so for the United States to halt them, saying that, you know, we're at a situation where we just need them for ourselves, what it suggests is, well, the United States cannot produce enough air defense systems to protect itself and its allies. And if that is the case, that is a national security crisis. For us to be spending as much as we are, and for other nations to be spending as much as they are on American missiles, and for us not to have enough to send them to Ukraine, I mean, any supply, I mean, even like even just continuing the aid already approved by Congress. Mind you, this is not a new aid package. This is an aid package already approved by Congress. If that is true, then we're in a mission critical situation. But the problem is, NBC is reporting that Hegseth halted these weapons despite the fact that this might not actually be jeopardizing U.S. military readiness. And this isn't coming from some, oh, look, this is some piffy like blogger or some like disgruntled staffer. This is coming from the Joint Staff. This is coming from the armed forces. This is not coming from some journalist at WAPO or some opinion writer. The White House has defended the decision, saying it followed an ongoing review by the Defense Department of U.S. assistance to allies and partners abroad that began this last month. The review began after Hegseth issued a memo ordering the Pentagon's Joint Staff to review stockpiles of all munitions, according to 3 officials familiar with the matter. The assessment found that some stockpiles of high-precision munitions are at lower levels, but not yet beyond critical minimums. The Joint Staff concluded that providing continued assistance to Ukraine would not drain U.S. supplies below a required threshold needed to ensure military readiness, the officials said. The Pentagon did not respond to a request for comment Thursday. Mind you, this is from NBC, the outlet that broke the story. They were the ones asking for comment. In Poland and other European countries, some of the U.S. weapons had already been loaded on the trucks, ready to be delivered to Kyiv to help its government fend off Russian missile attacks and hold the line against Russian forces in the country's east. Then military officers and officials handling the shipment got word that the delivery had been called off, said 2 sources with knowledge of the matter. Now, this was not sent to Kyiv in advance. Warning was not sent to anybody in Congress in advance, and so it ruffled a lot of feathers. It got a lot of people quite upset. So the Europeans, they were not happy. Of course, the Ukrainians were not happy. And not only, of course, were the Democrats not happy, but many Republicans who would have wanted to be at least informed of this, even if they wouldn't agree with the decision, were not happy. As well as the usual conflict with Congress saying they want to be informed of these types of national security decisions in advance before these decisions are made. A process complaint. But mind you, if we just stop Patriot shipments altogether, if we stop air defense shipments altogether, right now Europe cannot make up the difference. Some of the Russian missiles are just going to get through because the French, the Italians, the Germans, not everybody makes enough air defense systems to send over to Ukraine to make up the complete difference. That's not to say that they couldn't do more. That's not to say that there aren't other launchers in Europe that could be sent over, that there aren't more missiles in reserve, and that maybe if they were to send a lot, even from what their own defense departments would say is for them mission critical, that it couldn't have an impact now, especially since what are these air defense systems being positioned towards defending against in the future? Further Russian incursions. Right now, they cannot produce enough at scale to completely make up the difference. And many of these European countries are relying on American manufacturers to make up the difference. And in fact, when you read reports from Politico about where these future shipments of weapons are going to come from in order to make up this big 5% defense spending, 3.5% on, procurement and stuff for the armed forces itself, 1.5% in other fields, it's kind of like, magic dust to get to the 5%. But, it is all spending. Where is that money going to be spent? A decent portion of it's probably going to be spent in the United States, to the great pleasure of the American president, because big business deals for the United States, to the great pleasure of the American defense industry, which continues to benefit from the intelligence collected from the air defense being used in Ukraine against Russian missiles, being able to continue to evolve American air defense from that data. And now we are no longer giving these people who helped us evolve our systems to this point any more systems to either protect themselves, or for us even selfishly looking towards, not only our national security interests, but the fact that, our defense industry, quite frankly, got a lot of benefits from this when it comes to testing these in real-time scenarios against the exact missile systems they were designed to defend against. And they got big packages of support from Ukrainian aid packages that expanded their artillery production quite significantly in the United States. And now those shells are not going to be sent over. That was just a gift to them, that now they can send those shells wherever they want. They can sell it to whoever they want, possibly the Israelis, possibly other American partners, possibly other countries like Egypt or whoever, who knows? Because if it's not at a mission critical level, really, then maybe it will be sold to other nations. Or, as I've talked about before, possibly Trump will just have to be told, look, we'll buy it from you. If you're not going to have these aid packages come in, we'll buy it from you. Because maybe that, I'm very suspicious of the fact that part of the reason that this aid could be cut off is Trump might be wanting to use it now, whether or not this was the original plan, but this could be a plan that's retrofitted going forward, because I could see it, is Trump using this to say, look, we're not going to send you any more of these air defense systems until you pay. Which, on one hand, is wrong, considering that Congress passed aid. On the other hand, I think many people would just appreciate the clarity at this point, considering how much there's just been the flip-flopping and there's been so much dragging of the Ukrainians along. I wanted to just move on from this, because I don't want to talk about this too much, but Yaroslav, before we wrap this up, Yaroslav, who wrote the fantastic book, Our Enemies Will Vanish. It's one of the few full books I've actually read about the war. I don't read a ton of books about the war. I mostly have read books concerning either Ukrainian history or trying to figure out the language, struggling still, but moving forward. But he wrote a really good book about it, and I do recommend it. He wrote about the European need to invest in air defense. The Europeans are right to protest against Trump withholding air defense from Ukraine, but France and Italy in particular need a hard look in the mirror. Lockheed Martin invested in a new plant in 2022 and is more than doubling its output of Patriot PAC-3 systems missiles to 650 a year. The French, Italian, and British consortium of NBDA and Thales, which makes comparable Aster missiles for SAMP-T, probably produces fewer than 100 a year. That's an artisanal quantity, enough for 2 to 3 days of air defense in a war like Ukraine. And the thing that really scares me is that it feels right now that the only direct answer we've got to this is we'll spend more. But if we spend more on a national level and not on a co-national level, these nation states working together to buy en masse, to try to integrate their defense systems together, and to try to not make it so, hey, these systems are going to be costing, millions more than they necessarily should. Because on the national level, with these different systems not being able to be produced at scale, And with these defense companies being able to charge much more for much less, you're going to get a lot less bang for your buck. And so if you invest 5% in your defense and you try to invest more in this, that's going to have some impact. But without going to an economy of scale, which the Russians have, you're going to have comparably less bang for your buck. If the Europeans spent no more, but had an economy of scale right now, there's a good chance that that would be on its face enough to deter Russia. Maybe not enough to reinforce Ukraine in all the ways that would be necessary, but I think it would be enough to deter Russia. But the problem is they don't. They have all these separate defense industries, which on their own have to compete. And they have their own defense establishments, which, quite frankly, when you talk about the business side of it, is quite happy with the state of affairs of producing much less for much more. So it's something that is going to have to be shaken up by the Europeans if they want to get serious about defense production and getting a bang for your buck, unless you want to spend ridiculous amounts of money that are going to have domestic political consequences if that money is being spent at the expense of pensioners or at the expense of public health care and at the expense of education or wherever they have to possibly make cuts in order to pay. If the European Union doesn't borrow together enough to make up the difference, either to reinforce the Ukrainians with further aid or to try to catch up. I would say that, though, if you're trying to do that on, a Danish model of helping to purchase procurement in Ukraine, where defense production costs are much lower, where you're going to get more bang for your buck in production, that might make more sense. But that's not being scaled up to the size that a lot of Ukraine supporters would want. Either way, though, the Europeans have a lot of defense procurement problems if they're going to be the ones that are left with the stick when it comes to Ukraine. So, Trump has a phone call with Putin after we hear about this aid cut. I'm nervous about it. Everybody seems to be nervous about it because they have no clue how it's going to go. Is Trump going to walk away from this saying, give another 2 more weeks, which he said multiple times to the failure of negotiations? Or is Trump going to say, you know what, now it's the time to take some action? Who knew? It could have been that Trump was told that, Putin had 3 riddles, and it could have been anything. But from what we were getting from Russian reports and American reports, Putin essentially said that he wants to keep going until the goals of the operation of the SMO, special military operation, are achieved, and that he is not willing to agree to a ceasefire. To make a long story short, there was also possibly some conversation about promoting traditional values in movies, according to the Russians, and a bunch of other, kind of side conversations that seem just so strange, considering the scale and violence of the war, when, again, they just continue to disrespect American pursuance of peace efforts. But Trump walked away from the meeting unhappy, at least publicly displaying unhappiness, saying that he is, and I quote, disappointed, and that this isn't the Putin that he knew.
For Russia and Ukraine, are you speaking to Zelensky tomorrow, and what are you hoping
I'm
the next
speaking to President Zelensky tomorrow, early in the morning, and I'm very disappointed with the conversation I had today with President Putin, because I don't think he's there. And I'm very disappointed. Well, it's not, I'm just saying, I don't think he's looking to stop. And that's too bad. This is Biden. This isn't me. This is Biden's war. It wouldn't have happened if I were president. It wouldn't have happened. So, I in one way I hate to get too involved because it's Biden's war. And I got stuck in the middle of it, just like I did with immigration and a lot of other things that they screwed up. But I was not happy with the conversation, no.
This idea of being disappointed makes sense. Putin change, this isn't the Putin I knew. I can't believe the Putin that started the war is continuing the war. It just, on its face, it seems silly to the people who have been paying attention to the war day by day, just reading Russian press statement after Russian press statement after Russian state media interview after Putin speech after Putin speech from the start of the war to now. It's quite silly to be, oh gosh, how he has changed. How has he changed from the guy who invaded in 2022, 2014, invasions of Chechnya, Georgia? How has he changed from what? In what way exactly has he changed? But he's disappointed. This is not the Putin he knew. And then he shifts it over to Biden. Every diplomatic failure here is Biden's fault. It's Biden, it's Biden, it's Biden. If Trump was in office, he would have done something to get Putin to respect him and respect NATO and respect Ukraine and not invade. But now that he's in office, Putin won't respect NATO, won't respect Ukraine, and won't respect Trump's efforts towards ceasefires, even though he puts forward 2-week deadline after 2-week deadline after 2-week deadline after 30-day deadline after, ceasefire red line after 100-day deadline after a 24-hour deadline after, if you remember the Biden debates, before being inaugurated deadline. So at a certain point, after even if you were to say Biden could have done more to prevent the war by adding pressure to the Russians in some way, saying like, look, if you invade Ukraine, we will support them with air assets. We will support them in XYZ, maybe even a no-fly zone if you want to, upset a few of the people on the anti-interventionist side. Like, you could go in that angle and try to redraw that. But once you go out there and you say 24 hours, 24 hours, 24 hours, you've claimed ending the war. And now you've openly fingered Putin as the problem multiple times after Zelensky has agreed to every ceasefire. He's agreed to the 30-day ceasefire. He agreed to your mineral deal to pay back the aid that nobody said was now apparently a loan. So at what point do you bring action after the words? Because that's what he talked about on the campaign trail, but we're not seeing any of that. And at the same time, as this speaking to the press happened, at like literally the same time, right after he finished that phone call with Putin, that's when the air attack on Ukraine started. And it was the largest air attack of the war, another record-breaking air attack on Kyiv, which a lot of footage came from. I was in my apartment. I heard a lot of anti-air fire. I saw a lot of it outside of my window. I heard Brownings operating. I heard what I believe were Gepards operating, German Gepards, which are, anti-air systems. And I heard multiple impacts. Shaheeds were flying over apartments, and it was like that all night long. All night long.
Corrupt, bankrupt man.
I mean, trying to sleep through that really is difficult. And I think really the only reason I was able to sleep through some of it was because, to be frank, I remember some of the drone attacks when I was on the Dobropila area. I remember some of the bombing when I was still in Pokrovsk, and I was able to sleep through some of that. But it's still like a pit-patter of sleep. It's like a nap followed by an interruption, followed by a nap. It was, imagine trying to sleep through this. Because with the 400 to 500 pieces of drone equipment, long-range attack drones that the Russians are reportedly making every month, people have to continue living life through this. This massive drones is meant to saturate the air defense systems, to be so overwhelming that the Ukrainians can just not shoot them all down. And we have seen them multiple times directly slam into Ukrainian civilian infrastructure, like this apartment building, like other apartment buildings during recent attacks, with zero interception. I talked about earlier when I was in Odessa, oh yes, the firing down of these shaheeds on the coastline could maybe hit a civilian building. That's true too. That is true. That's true everywhere. That's a risk that is going to be there regardless if the attack is a war crime, regardless if they're targeting civilian infrastructure or not. Interceptions can be a danger for civilians. That's why there's things like red zones for air defense operators, where they don't fire in that direction due to the risk of intercepts hitting civilians, or even their own machine gun fire hitting civilians. But these are just slamming into apartment buildings. This just slammed into an apartment building. I saw another video a week ago that slammed into an apartment building. My fixer, Bogdan, it slammed into his apartment building 2 weeks ago while his grandmother was visiting. She came to visit back from Ireland for the first time, to see people, to hug family and stuff. And the night that she's there, the building gets hit by a shaheed. This is becoming much more frequent because Russian drone production is expanding, and they're working to continue to expand drone production as Russia is bringing in North Korean workers to work on these factories to expand production. And what are those North Korean workers going to do when they go back to North Korea with all that knowledge? That's something the Elbridge Colbys of the world should be thinking about. Here is a bomb shelter in Kyiv. There are a lot of them. One that people use pretty common is the metro station. If there's a basement, you can use that. But I know that a lot of people in my area use the metro. Very bad. There was this photograph taken of the city burning in the morning as the firefighters and rescue workers across the city were responding to the attack. Sesu. And the city was on fire. Smoke filled the sky. I was in a group chat with other journalists and fixers, and we were texting about the damage going on, and they could smell smoke. I could smell smoke. It was bad. And I actually saw that the Ukrainian Art History account reposted a painting by Ukrainian artist Taras Shevchenko of Fire on the Steppe that actually reminded a lot of people eerily of the fires in Kyiv. Taras Shevchenko being probably one of the, if not the most significant and well-recognizable Ukrainian and national figure, being a poet. Now, after this, mind you, this happened immediately after the Trump-Putin phone call. So Trump was told, we're going to continue the war. I don't want to do your ceasefire. And then he immediately bombs Kyiv in this massive way. The Ukrainian foreign minister points this out, directly signaling to the world. Absolutely horrible and sleepless night in Kyiv, one of the worst so far. Hundreds of Russian drones and ballistic missiles rained down upon the Ukrainian capital right after Putin spoke with President Trump, and he did it on purpose. Enough of waiting. Putin clearly shows his complete disregard for the United States and everyone who has called for an end to the war. Moscow must be slapped with the toughest of sanctions without delay. Ukraine must be provided with all necessary means to defend itself. Wrong decisions can only encourage the aggressor to escalate terror. Every criminal regime in the world is now watching closely Putin's actions and responses to them. If he gets away with all of this, everyone will get a very clear message. Stop waiting for peace. Act to achieve peace. Peace through strength, calling over to Trump's campaign tagline. And they also posted about Chinese components to these drones. As there is a report that's circulating in the media that the Chinese foreign minister told EU representatives that the Chinese government, Beijing, cannot afford Russia to lose the war in Ukraine. China Foreign Ministry Wang Yi reportedly told the EU's top diplomat Kajakalis on July 3rd that the country cannot afford for Russia to lose the war in Ukraine amid fears that the U.S. would shift focus towards Beijing, the South China Morning Post reported, citing sources familiar with the conversation. Of course, we're having to rely on SCMP, South China Morning Post, reporting here and their sources. As the war in Ukraine drags on, Wang's reported comments suggest that Russia's war in Ukraine may serve China's strategic needs as a focus has deviated away from Beijing's mounting preparation to launch its own possible invasion into Taiwan. The thing is, though, whether or not Europe and the United States are distracted, is like if the United States takes the strategy of let's just ignore this and concentrate on China, well, the Europeans can't. And if the United States wants to prevent a war in Asia, one big piece of leverage that could exist is the existence of European markets for Chinese production, the continuance of those consumers to buy up from that market. Because while China can probably deal with a trade war from the United States with pain, but survival, if that also includes Europe, an extremely wealthy consumerist continent, that'll be a little bit more difficult. That'll be a little bit more difficult. That combined with a few Asian Pacific allies, if they wanted to coordinate, would put a lot of economic pressure on the Chinese and build as a bigger disincentive for them to invade Taiwan or start a general war. And I think that there's also similar economic incentives for the United States not to. But if the Europeans don't believe that the United States cares about its strategic interests and its main interest as well, we got to defend Europe. We got to defend the gates of Europe, the largest war in Europe since World War II. It's going to really tighten up their strategic flexibility there. So, like, no matter whether or not, like, Ukraine lasts another year, whether or not, and, you know, did they immediately collapse, whether or not Ukraine wins the war outright, whether or not whatever outcome in your mind happens, the longer this war drags on, the better it is for the Chinese. And the more that the Europeans are distracted with this, the better it serves the Chinese with this viewpoint in mind. And it's not difficult to imagine them having that viewpoint, considering how much their economy has served the Russian war effort, not just taken advantage of the Russian energy export. Of course, they benefit as well from, you know, being able to build up their drone production by being able to sell so many components. But this shows that whether or not, you know, all these resources are shifted to Asia, the Chinese are probably not going to stop facilitating the Russian war effort. Being able to separate the Russians from the Chinese and from them balancing off each other is completely, it's a fool's errand. And so I think it would be smarter if you were to build pressure on the Russians so they could not drag out the war, and that they would have to either, you know, make a deal of some reason, or that their war effort gets bogged down, they start facing setbacks, and the war goes in a direction that is so unfavorable to them that they have to see possibly even further compromise down the road. Either way, it's going to be a shorter outcome than the Ukrainians being undercut and the Russians being emboldened, thinking, well, now we've done the hard part, we waited them out. This was the hard part, this is the easy part. And under that strategy, if there was a war in Asia, Europe would be a little distracted. If America needed to, you know, buy up some extra air defense systems, if America needed, you know, European ship production, if America needed them just to stick out the economic neck, yeah, good luck. Good luck. North Korea also, we're hearing reports, we're going to talk about a American pivot to Asia. Let's talk about an Asian pivot to Ukraine. North Korea sending another 30,000 troops to Russia amid Russia's war against Ukraine. Whether or not these soldiers are going to be put on the border with Ukraine in order to try to stop a future Ukrainian incursion into Kursk or to Belgorod or into any of these areas, whether or not they're going to be deployed in Ukraine proper, and they're going to be used in offensive operations in the Donetsk region. I see some people trying to, like, punch down on these soldiers, like, oh, wow, I guess more minuses for the Ukrainians to take. These soldiers fight ferociously from all the reports that I hear about, from all the testimony I've heard. They fight ferociously. They engage in large scale mass infantry attacks. And it has, while taken a lot of casualties, these teams, they are also inflicting casualties. And when you have a manpower crisis on the Ukrainian side, these types of pressures do have an impact. And to a lot of the world and to a lot of Ukrainians, there's been a type of question of, well, who's being a better ally here, the North Koreans or the United States? Because the United States, you don't know what they're going to do any day of the week, even if they put a red line in the sand. They could say that this is the final line. I said we're going to build all this pressure, dual use goods are going to be cracked down upon. We're going to sanction, do secondary sanctions, and then none of it's pulled on. North Korea, they're sending their soldiers. North Korea, they're sending shells. North Korea, they're sending artillery systems. North Korea is getting Pantsers in response. North Korea is probably getting assistance to the shipbuilding program. North Korea is getting workers that'll be trained on Shahed production, long-range drones production. And that knowledge will be brought back to North Korea. This type of impact has meant that, not just the usual liberal critics and left-wing critics or Democrat Party critics or armchair critics like me and my big chair aren't just criticizing Trump for this. The New York Post. This is from the editorial board of the New York Post. Trump must reverse the dangerous Ukraine aid halt. The Pentagon's decision to pause aid to Ukraine is a massive blunder. President Donald Trump should reverse it ASAP. The White House confirmed Tuesday that to put America's interests first, the United States won't be sending promised and much-needed artillery rounds, Patriot air defense, rocket systems, Hellfire missiles, and other weapon systems to Kyiv. The excuse, a Pentagon assistant raised concerns that the United States' own weapon stores are running too low. By the way, I just want to throw this out there, we didn't need an estimation from the Joint Staff in order to know that part of this is nonsense. The guided munitions that was talked about is also being blocked. We do not have a shortage of those. Those guided munitions for GMLRS systems, there's no shortage. That everyone knows that. And when I say everyone knows that, I don't mean like everybody on the street knows about the GLMRS systems. GLMN. I hate abbreviations. And I also hate the English language. And people want me to learn the Ukrainian language, for God's sakes. But these guided multiple launcher rocket systems and the munitions for them, if you're in the know, in the defense command in the United States, you know that there's no shortage. If you are somebody who is a Ukrainian official who monitors this carefully, or somebody who just, I guess, would, for whatever reason, want to be in the know when it comes to this, there's no shortage. So it can't be a lack of knowledge in Washington, D.C. of, well, I guess the GLMRS systems are also in short need. So why was that also included? Why was that included in the cuts? There's some stuff here that makes it feel more malicious, and which is why people are reacting to it so bitterly. This is also from the National Review. In cutting off Ukraine, Trump discredits the message he sent with the Iran strikes. And this one comes from the Washington Post, I believe. No, this wasn't the Washington Post. I believe this was the New York Times. Let me actually double check. I'm sorry. All the liberal outlets are basically the same. Have you ever, it's all MSM anyway, right, guys? It's all MSM. It was the Wall Street Journal. Okay, Wall Street Journal. Ukraine has already agreed to Mr. Trump's ceasefire terms, and the way to peace isn't to treat Ukraine as if it's equally as responsible for the war as Russia. The way to end the war faster is to impose tougher sanctions and arm Ukraine further, but Mr. Trump has imposed no pressure for peace on Mr. Putin's beyond plantative social media posts. The latest arms decision against Ukraine looks like another signal to Mr. Putin to continue the war. And why not? He can keep banking territorial gains while Mr. Trump keeps begging the dictator, pretty please, for a truce. Pretty please. This was also from the editorial board. also from the editorial board, in the Wall Street Journal. I mean, this is pretty bad. This is something that I always feared. And this is why Biden raced to try to send as much aid from the packages that were passed before Trump got inaugurated, because there was always the threat of a freeze. And this is the second freeze of aid. And again, Pete Hegseth considered freezes on 2 other occasions, but it was reversed, and he tried to go through with it, and he was stopped. So there was 2 freezes and 2 freezes that almost happened. And this is the second freeze. And as the second freeze goes into effect, Trump has a meeting with Putin, walks away from it, admits openly it's a diplomatic failure, then just blames Biden. And as he's blaming Biden and putting the war on him, Kyiv is being bombed. So Ukraine is not just waiting around for this state of affairs to continue, just holding out its cap, just hoping the United States says, well, I guess Europe's security interest, the transatlantic relationship does matter for us. Well, now that they said 5%, now we're going to maybe entertain this more. And well, after Trump has tried diplomacy for like 170 days with the Russians, maybe we can take this in a different direction. The Ukrainians are trying to buy the weapons. We've talked about this before on the channel when the Ukrainians offered $15 billion to buy Patriot systems, but the Ukrainians are trying as many ways as they can to buy the weapons. And there's also some thinking being done in European capitals about European nations buying the weapons on Ukraine's behalf from the American defense industry, continuing to, benefit the American defense industry, as Europe also needs to invest in its domestic defense industry, and take those weapons and give them to the Ukrainians as Trump is clamping down on these aid packages. Ukraine is striking out on getting the U.S. to send it more weapons, so it plans to try something new, asking Washington to let Europe purchase U.S. weapons for Ukraine, according to 6 people with knowledge of the request. The novel approach was being discussed around the time that Trump administration moved to halt some deliveries on military aid that had already been allocated for Kyiv, including Patriot air defense interceptors and highly explosive artillery rounds. The move, first reported by Politico on Tuesday, blindsided top Ukrainian officials. It also comes as Europe pledges to spend more on defense and is looking for creative ways to do so. One example of this is Zelensky met with an American defense corporation in Denmark to pursue joint drone production. And he bragged a lot about how this is going to help produce tons and tons and tons of drones in Ukraine. Of course, this is not a deal that is on its own game-changing. We're talking about, thousands upon thousands of drones being made, but it is just one example of the Zelensky government purchasing this equipment and directly paying them for these services instead of just waiting for the aid to come through. But again, if the Ukrainians come forward and offer the money, that does not mean that the Trump administration has to accept it. If they are saying that they're at critical levels, even though there's a decent chance they're not, that we're at critical levels, despite what the Joint Staff says, despite what other sources in the Pentagon say, despite other thing that's being reported. If we're at those levels, or they at least want to follow that line, then whether or not the Ukrainians want to purchase it, it's a question of our security interests over their security interests, which, of course, anybody in the American defense establishment is going to defend America's security interests over Ukraine's. So if they can say that these are contradictory, instead of just saying, well, we need to try diplomacy a little bit more, and so we're not going to, then maybe, because that in and of itself at this point would look like just a concession to the Russians. It would definitely, since the Russians said that they had to stop sending Ukraine aid in order for there to be peace, which basically that anybody in the know means, if you stop sending them aid, it'll be easier to conquer Ukraine. This is another way of getting there. Whether or not when you cut that aid is another way of getting to that Russian demand. And so Peskov was quite happy about it. But they won't be happy if it's replaced with a defense procurement, which the Ukrainians are trying to pursue, but are still getting only limited amounts of. Here is Zelensky talking about his call with Donald Trump, which came after the massive meeting with Vladimir Putin, which led to absolutely nothing. and which came on July 4th, which of course, Independence Day. Dear Ukrainians, a very brief update on today. It was a rocky start to the day, with more than 500 Russian attack drones and missiles. Difficult, but a significant number were shot down. Regrettably, some struck their targets. Interceptor drones demonstrated important performance today. Dozens of Shaheds were taken down specifically by interceptors. We are scaling this up to the hilt, increasing production of such types of drones, the interceptor ones, and expanding training and preparation for our drone operators. The mission is clear. Today, I also spoke with President Trump. It was an important conversation. We agreed to arrange a meeting between our teams to strengthen air defense capabilities. We had an in-depth discussion about joint production, something both of us in the United States needs. Today also marks an important decision in Europe, in Denmark, our first agreement on weapons production. For us in Europe, cooperation between Ukraine and Denmark. This is paramount, both in security and investment. Okay, so he says the key thing that Zelensky says here is that Trump agreed to help Ukraine when it comes to procuring air defense capabilities. Now, whether that means he is going to reverse the decision and send over the Patriots, or whether that means some pursuance of the Danish model and Ukraine, maybe instead of just having, the United States pay some money to production on the ground, pay towards, factory production of interceptor drones or something. Maybe it is a example of the Ukrainians having to purchase themselves American equipment, and they'll be able to work with more, drone production, anti-drone production, or who knows. But they said to work towards air defense, to help strengthen air defense. Whether that's going to translate into the Danish model, whether that's going to translate into them removing the halt on the aid to allow the rest of the congressionally approved aid to go to Ukraine, whether that's going to mean defense procurement, we don't know. But it is a potentially positive sign from Zelensky. But considering, again, how many times these freezes have been on and then off and then on and then almost on, I honestly do not know where this is going to go. And I wanted to say one last thing. I wanted to point towards the bombing of American businesses in Ukraine, because there was a lot of locations that were hit in the massive attack on Kyiv. One example would be actually the Polish consulate building, which was hit. Nobody was injured. Nobody was killed. But the Polish consulate building, a diplomatic building for the Polish government, was damaged in the attack on Ukraine. But also, American businesses are being damaged. American businesses are being burnt. American businesses are being bombed. And it was Donald Trump's strategy that was being used to confront Zelensky during an Oval Office meeting, saying, hey, they would never go after you guys with this mineral deal. If we do this mineral deal and we have all these American businesses invested in Ukraine, then that will act as a disincentive. Maybe you don't even need NATO membership. And there's been all this theorizing about how much actual weight that would have. And I think most of it is being done by people who are, I think maybe amateurish when it comes to the analysis, because all you have to do is go and look at how American businesses are being treated right now. Here is the president of American Chamber of Commerce in Ukraine talking about how American businesses have been bombed and how other, civilian businesses have been bombed. As Americans celebrate Independence Day, actually, we could just listen to him directly.
Today is 4th of July here in Kyiv, and American business is being hit by Russia. We see that the 600 members of the American Chamber of Commerce here in Ukraine are being targeted by Russian missiles. We had a sleepless night here in Kyiv where 500 Russian aerial attacks on Ukraine, on central Kyiv, on American business here in Ukraine. We see that out of our 600 members, over 50% have suffered damage. That's why we call the US administration, the White House and President Trump to support American business here in Ukraine and to help provide Ukraine with the defense it needs. Ukraine is fighting together for freedom, for liberty, and for independence. And today, on the 4th of July, we all stand together. Thank you to all Americans for your support. Thank you to Ukraine for fighting for independence.
So, giving his generalist, his general support for Ukraine, thank you for supporting Ukraine. But the underpinning strategy that was getting pitched after Trump said 24 hours was, we'll stop a future war by business investments. Trump's excuse for this tragic failure and loss of life, which is now at his feet after he went and tried to champion himself as a peacemaker, is that if he was president, while Putin was suggesting invading and Putin then invaded, of course, he wasn't openly suggesting invading, but all the evidence suggested he was going to invade, that Trump would have done something to stop it. Therefore, this is Biden's war. But if the only strategy that has been offered as a deterrence against the Russians that the United States has actually gotten any progress on, which is them making profits off of Ukrainian resources and having that that interest that America has, that financial business interest, by it being American businesses on the ground, that it would stop a future Russian invasion. It's just not true. It's just not true. And so if that was the case now, why wouldn't that have been the case back in 2022 if that was Trump's big gambit, was announcing a big new investment program in Ukraine or whatever it would have been? Trump has not proved himself to be a peacemaker. Trump right now is the forever war president in Ukraine, not willing to take the actions to pressure the Russians to end the war, and not willing to do what is necessary to limit the most tragic impacts of the war as it continues. He is not only the forever war president, he is allowing the war to get worse. Let me look at chat for a second. Sup, folks? Hello, Mako. Carry Potato, Black-Pilled Kiwi. Alanix, I'll debate you on this, but I don't feel sorry for Europe at this point. They had 3 years to prepare for this, and they didn't prepare for it at all. At this point, if the rest of Europe gets pillaged and bombed, I don't care. Alanix, fuck you. I mean, look, it's one thing to be like, look, it's terrible, but I'm sorry. What's connected with that? It's like civilian executions, horrible bombings of homes. Like, do we want like an Izium style war? And by the way, what are the nations that are going to be most affected by it? Is it going to be Germany? Is it going to be France? Or is it going to be Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, the countries that are most, to be quite frank from my position, in the know and trying to do the most in their means to help Ukraine? It's going to be the countries that have actually pursued the policy which you would be saying they should, that are going to be the ones that suffer the most. And it's going to be the French and the Germans and the Spaniards and the other countries that are not, moving as much with their means, that are going to be the ones that are largely isolated from the impacts relative, of course, it'll still impact them severely, relative to the country that's directly being invaded and occupied. If war was to expand into Europe, like you're suggesting. So when we talk about like, a lack of sympathy for the Europeans, I can understand a lack of sympathy for maybe European political leadership who is now acting aghast at the situation that they're in. But I don't think that should outflow into the civilian population. And this certainly shouldn't outflow in this way, knowing that the people that are going to be most affected on the ground are those that would be much more sympathetic to Ukraine in the first place. Is the hoped outcome now that Ukraine gets good peace guarantees and Russia keeps what it conquered so far? I mean, like 120 days ago, Trump was talking like, hey, we're going to try to negotiate as much land back for the Ukrainians as possible. So it seemed like they could negotiate some type of land for land swap, or like, hey, Russia has to give back Mariupol and XYZ, and then we'll freeze the line there for now. And in the future, this will remain under. It seemed like there was going to be some sort of compromise for a lasting ceasefire and settlement to this war, while not addressing larger territorial problems, which would remain unaddressed. But Trump completely abandoned any pressure strategy, and so since he abandoned a pressure strategy, the idea of it getting anywhere close to achieving something like that was completely outside of his reach, and so it went nowhere. I personally haven't given up on the mineral deal yet. The money has yet to start flowing in. Once it does, I think there would be a large lobby movement to liberate Ukrainian lands, especially land with a lot of resources. I mean, there is potentiality of those investments reaping benefits down the line, but the exact likelihood of like that reaping like we don't know exactly how profitable those mines will end up being. It's a question. And I don't really know if the lobbying effort's going to carry that much political weight, honestly. Certainly, I'm not going to base the war on it. I mean, it's not impossible for it to be something, considering how Trump looks at minerals. I could see it as maybe if Ukraine. I mean, the only thing I could imagine is the Ukrainians say, hey, look, we want to get this land back. Also, look at all these minerals that will then be within the orbit of the United States. But then what if the Russians say in response, hey, Trump, well, if you don't, we'll give you access to those minerals anyway. I guess maybe it won't be on terms that are better than Ukraine. Maybe will. I have no clue. But I mean, yeah, there is some avenue. Okay, let's actually watch a few Steve Rosenberg segments on what the Russian papers are like right now, since we're on a Ukraine roll. We still got quite a bit to talk about on this, or at least a few things. And then we have, of course, the big, beautiful bill, some Palestine and Gaza updates, some moments in Congress, a bunch of news that I missed. Man, I was in Odessa for a bit. This is actually a Steve Rosenberg report from June 30th, talking about the Russian federal budget being readjusted due to oil prices coming back down after the 12-day war between the Israelis and the Iranians has ceased for now. And also some mocking, of course, of the Europeans, saying that the European economy is headed towards disaster. So the Russian economy is not doing great, but also Europe's economy. So it seems to be that the Russian have had to openly acknowledge that the Russian economy is in a bad state. The Russian economic minister has openly said that they're probably headed towards recession. But if you just cushion that reality with statements following it saying also Europe's not economically in the best of situations, then maybe Russians will take it better. At least that's the perception I have.
Today, the Russian government paper Rossiyskaya Gazeta publishes all these numbers. What is this? Well, it's a document on amendments to the federal law on the federal budget for 2025 and planned period 2026 and 2027. The authorities have had to recalculate the budget because the Treasury's expected annual income has fallen. It's now been set at 38.5 trillion rubles instead of what had been predicted, nearly 40.3 trillion. The main reason for the drop in revenue is clear: the fall in revenue from the sale of oil and gas. Initially, revenue was calculated based on the optimistic forecast of oil at $69.7 a barrel in 2025. Now the forecast has been updated to $56 a barrel. It's quite possible that in the autumn another adjustment to the budget will be necessary, but two things remain unshakable. all budget obligations will be fulfilled and there is no need to fear changes to the tax system to boost budget revenues. The government paper then proceeds to provide some positive economic news. In the foreseeable future, food prices will not rise markedly. There are currently no factors that would cause a sharp rise in food prices. And yet on the front page of Moskovsky Komsomolets today, here is a play on words which I would translate like this: pig rise in pork prices.
This is the mental conundrum that Russian papers have to be in. If you completely ignore the price rise, then the lived reality of everyday Russians who have to go buy things to, live is going to so contradict to what they're reading from the state press that this will, as propaganda will just not work on them. So some of them are choosing to acknowledge it through other means, while others are just denying it while admitting some problems with the economy, while others are choosing just to focus on the problems with the economies of their opponents. And so they're all trying different strategies to deal with the fact that the economy is, a bit in a trough, to play on the pig.
Meat market experts have noted that in the first 6 months of the year, the price of 1 kilo of pork in live weight has risen by 15%, up to 145 rubles in Russia's Central Federal District. In June alone, the price rose by 7%. The main question, how soon and on what scale?
Groiper got a Tier 2 subscription. Welcome back, my favorite Stalinist streamer.
Wow. Stalinist. I'm Stalinist? Oh, I did see this. Well, I have to... okay, I'll comment on this in a second. Oh, God. Okay, I was put on this, political spectrum chart, and I was given... I was... Apparently, I'm I don't know if I'm off left Ukraine or if I'm... We'll go in... We'll look at it in a second. It's very interesting.
Russia's Central Federal District. In June alone, the price rose by 7%. The main question, how soon and on what scale will this hoggish price rise reach the meat counters in shops and markets? Same paper, and another reminder that in July, utility tariffs head skywards. Gas, electricity, water and heating tariffs become more expensive. Gas tariffs will rise on average by 10.3%, electricity by 12.6%. Komsomolskaya Pravda, an admission from President Putin that high military expenditure has fueled inflation in Russia. Regarding...
Oh, I saw that too. That surprised me. I listened to I went and listened to the audio to make sure it was the case. And then I sent it to somebody else because, of course, my Russian Ukrainian is not that good. I understand maybe 1 out of every 10 words at best.
Burns
And that's on a good day.
Morally
Corrupt, brain-work man. Hey! Thank you, Duckbringer, for the Tier 1 sub and the little raid. Thank you for the raid. I appreciate it. But yeah, when Putin openly acknowledged that the economy is really in a rut and that inflation is directly related to the war, that is him acknowledging that the war is having a negative impact on the spending power of Russian consumers, at the same time that we know that food prices have been impacted. They have increased. The government has moved to try to find ways to try to deal with the basic economic staples of Russian society not going too out of whack, but they haven't been able to stop all of it, especially when their coffers are not endless and they do need more money to spend on the war. They are not adjusting their social services to deal with inflation. Pensions are not experiencing large boosts. The sugar rush of the Russian economy from the war industry is slowing down. Sugar rushes don't last forever. And while there might be some amount of GDP growth that's concentrated in the defense sector, and there has been an amount of poverty reduction, to be blunt, due to the amount of people that are taking death payments and how much the Russian armed forces is paying out and the large recruitment in the defense sector. But the unemployment problems, when it comes to the fact that they don't have enough laborers to work across the economy as they're sending more people off to war, and the other really systemic issues in the economy persist. And with the Russian oil industry not being able to make it up as the projected massive increase from Middle East conflict did not arise, they're going to have to find places to cut. They're going to have to find places to trim. And if they want to keep spending, and not only keep spending on the armed forces, but continuing to increase spending to keep where they are, as they're having to recruit older and older men and more young men. Conversely, as we're seeing by the end of 2024, the average Russian volunteer was 50 years old, and we're seeing more with less job opportunities available in some regions of Russia. A lot of youth signing up at age 18, age 19. I've seen the death reports recently. It's sad,
Harry
honestly.
Potato got a Tier 1 subscription. Was just in NHA Trang, Vietnam. Tons of Russians there, so someone's still making money. Discount tours place.
Thank you for the $5 Tier 1 sub, Carrie Potato. I appreciate that.
Fake Alec Kyle Parker has donated $5. Hey Dylan, short. Hugh greater than 3.
5'10" is 1 inch above national average, as I keep track of every day. Thank you very much. And Carrie Potato, I've always wanted to check out Vietnam. I wanted to check it out because I like spicy food, and they have a decent amount of it. Anyway, back to this.
Russia. Regarding expenditure on defense, Russia is spending 6.3% of GDP on it. That's 13.5 trillion rubles a year. Our entire GDP is 223 trillion.
Oh, and yeah, there is a big Russian community in Vietnam. And when you go to those businesses, like, they'll serve like a lot of Russian food there. You'll see like a lot of the signs, they're in Russian, not even in Vietnamese. I've been told this by people who've been there before. Very interesting. Big, there's like a Russian diaspora community in Vietnam.
In rubles. 13.5 out of 223.
Wait, let me go back.
Expenditure has fueled inflation in Russia. Regarding expenditure on defense, Russia is spending 6.3% of GDP on it. That's 13.5 trillion rubles a year. Our entire GDP is 223 trillion rubles. 13.5 out of 223, that's a lot. We paid for that in inflation, but we are fighting this inflation. And then, something I've noticed quite a bit in the Russian state media recently, the newspaper writes about economic problems in Europe. Like a monkey on a bicycle, Europe's economy is cheerfully careering towards the abyss. The other thing the Russian media is doing a lot of right now is presenting NATO, Europe as the aggressor, and Russia as the innocent victim, particularly after NATO countries pledged to spend 5% of GDP on defence. Keep in mind this pledge is the result of Russia's large-scale invasion of Ukraine. But Komsomolskaya Pravda goes all historic. However hard and painfully militant Europe tries to hit Russia, it ends unintelligently. Is it really worth carrying on the cause of Hitler, or in the case of the French, Napoleon? In that case, Russia will continue the cause of our fathers and grandfathers. Our undefeated country is ready to teach them another lesson. For now, we're just warning. They try to bury us, but soon they'll drop dead themselves, says Putin coldly. They'd better be listening. More from Vladimir Putin and from Donald Trump in Moskovsky Komsomolets. Interesting how in Moscow they're openly talking now about how they massage President Trump's vanity. Putin threw fuel onto the fire of Trump's vanity by saying, I deeply respect the current US president. He's travelled a very long, difficult and dangerous path to return to power and the White House. He is a courageous man, this is clear. And Trump gushed. Vladimir Putin made some very nice statements. He respects our country again.
Okay, let's move on to the next one, because we still have a lot to catch up on from Steve Rosenberg. From today's Russian papers, on the ruins of the former USSR, more hostile states have revealed itself. Russian papers railing against a lot of other former Soviet states that have not taken kindly to being asked to reconvene with the Ruski Mir.
Today's Russian papers provide an illuminating picture of Russia's current relations with former Soviet states. And judging from what we read in the press here, these relations are not great. First, there's Ukraine, of course. Russia's war there is in its fourth year. And now Azerbaijan is making headlines. Независимая газета. Relations sour between Russia and Azerbaijan. A few days ago in Yekaterinburg, 6 Russian citizens, ethnic Azerbaijani men, were detained in relation to a contract killings case. 2 of the men died. According to Russia's investigative committee, according to preliminary information, one of the suspects died of a heart attack. The cause of death of the second man is being established. In Baku, the Azerbaijani foreign minister summoned the Russian chargé d'affaires to protest the raid by Russian security forces on flats where our compatriots are living. In Azerbaijan, all cultural events connected to Russia have been cancelled. Moskovsky Komsomolets. On the ruins of the former USSR, one more hostile state has revealed itself. It's not Georgia. It's not the Russophobic Baltic states. The tragedy comes from the most unexpected place, sunny Baku, where our partners are ready to open a second front against us. For now, in terms of diplomacy and propaganda, but who knows what will follow. Our strategic partner has cancelled official visits and cultural events. On Monday, Azerbaijani police carried out a special operation in the office of the Russian news agency Sputnik Azerbaijan. 2 men were detained, director Igor Kartavych and editor-in-chief Yevgeny Belousov. Kommersant reports that the men are suspected of illegal financing. Izvestia calls what is happening a giant scandal and notes that reports have appeared in the Azerbaijani media heavily criticising Russian domestic and foreign policy.
Oh my gosh! Can you believe there was media in Azerbaijan that criticized Russia? What's very interesting about this, though, is that Zelensky has taken advantage of this specific divide and has started sending messages that are friendly to the Azerbaijani government. And the Azerbaijani government has responded by reiterating support for Ukraine's territorial integrity. Now, the Azerbaijani government is not exactly what you would call not authoritarian or of a nature that stands on democratic principles through and through. But Ukraine feels that it is in a war for survival, which I believe it is, and therefore sees Azerbaijan as another potential pressure point on the Russians. And we've talked about this before, that the Russians have put all their eggs in the Ukraine basket. They gave up Assad's regime in order to do that. They have been unable to help the Iranians more due to that point as well, and not being able to resupply their long-range air defense systems during the 12-day war with the Israelis. And so they can't really deal with too many other security crises right now. So if a security crisis was to happen on the Azerbaijani border, that would be something that would benefit the Ukrainians. I don't think that is going to happen, but still, the fact of the matter is that if there's a possibility that it could, then the Russians might have to bring resources over in that direction. But it doesn't have to be Azerbaijan. It could be any other number of countries on the border of the largest nation on the planet. T-Rex, thank you so much for the primer. I appreciate that. Please accept my Bezos bucks. I do appreciate those Bezos bucks.
Then there's Armenia. Yesterday, there was a meeting of foreign ministers of CSTO states, CSTO being the Collective Security Treaty Organization, a military alliance of 6 post-Soviet countries. But Armenia wasn't there. It has frozen its participation in the CSTO. Независимая газета, the withdrawal of Armenia from the CSTO could spark a crisis in the organization. Meanwhile, in Moldova, once in Moscow's sphere of influence, the majority of citizens of Moldova support the idea of accession to the European Union, according to a public opinion survey presented by iData on Monday. 61.4% back Moldova joining the EU, 26.2% are against. Only 38.1% support the idea of Moldova joining the Eurasian Union, 47.3% are against. However, judging by this 16-page supplement dedicated to relations between Moscow and Minsk, Russia's ties with Belarus remain strong. The 2 countries claim that in their union state, the economy is growing. And to represent that, a picture. A statue of Lenin and a couple of big Belarusian tractors. And the headline, Remembering the Past, We are creating the future.
That was the July 1st Russian state headlines. Moving over to July 2nd, as they talk about more economic concerns. Again, the Russian papers are trying to find some way to deal with the bad numbers coming straight from the mouth of the government, as they can't deny the pressure anymore.
Lots again on the economy in today's Russian papers. Nezavissimaya Gazeta. In June, the Russian car market kept up its 25% fall. Because of expensive credit, the central bank has crashed car sales and manufacturing. Sales of new cars in Russia in June may have fallen by a quarter. Car dealers do not believe demand will return this year. Meanwhile, the Russian government has promised to solve the crisis in the coal industry in 2026. Russian officials are hoping for a rise in global prices, although this contradicts international forecasts. Moskovsky Komsomolets. Russians with credit cards are struggling more and more to pay off their debts. According to data at the start of the summer, 8.3 million Russians were more than 90 days late in settling credit card arrears. On the 1st of January, the figure was 7.7 million people. A year ago, even less, 6.9 million. And again, we read about the rise in utility bills. From the 1st of July 2025, utilities and communal services are now on average 15% more expensive in Moscow. Electricity tariffs have gone up 23%. Kommersant. Industry notes a fall in demand. June 2025 was the most alarming month for Russian manufacturing industry in 3 years. The S&P Global Russia Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, PMI, collapsed to 47.5 from 50.2 in May. A fall below 50 signals a drop in business activity. The main problems in June were related to demand. The volume of new orders fell sharply on the domestic and external markets. Izvestia. Wage arrears in Russia have tripled. By the end of the first quarter of 2025, wage arrears in Russia had tripled, according to a report by the General Confederation of Trade Unions. Referencing official data, they note that at the end of 2024, arrears equalled 0.5 billion rubles, rising to 1.5 billion by the end of March. However, according to the union's own calculations, the real figure at the end of the first quarter was much higher, 2.4 billion. Mind you, here's a front page story to take your mind off economic problems. The Russian government paper Rossiyskaya Gazeta leads with where, how and how much can school children earn in the summer holidays. And talking of holidays, in 2026 Russians will get 27 days off in national bank holidays. That's almost 1 month of extra time off. The New Year break will last 12 days, from the 31st of December to the 11th of January. And while we're here, foreigners in Russia who don't hand over their biometrics will have their mobile connections cut. Due to a change in the law, foreigners can only sign a contract with a mobile phone operator after registering in the unified biometric system. Meanwhile, Kommersant describes the current tension between Moscow and Baku as the most serious crisis in relations between Russia and Azerbaijan since the end of the Soviet Union.
Okay, we got two more. This is for July 3rd. Russian papers talking about the tensions in Azerbaijan. As I was saying earlier, there have been an escalation in tensions with Azerbaijan. There was also a report that came out from Azerbaijani media saying that a Russian officer admitted to downing an Azerbaijani airliner, Embraer 190AR, operated by Azerbaijani Airlines. This crashed in Kazakhstan on December 25th, 2024, after it came under fire in Grozny, Chechnya. 38 people died. This was a really big scandal that just due to just how fast this war travels, you know, a lot of people abroad have forgotten about, but in Azerbaijan, people have not forgotten about it. And with 2 people detained in Russia of Azerbaijani origin recently, there have been some retaliatory arrests in Azerbaijan, and tensions continue to escalate.
The current tensions between Moscow and Baku continue to receive a lot of column space in the Russian papers. Front page of Moskovsky Komsomolets today. Baku responds to the detention of Russian mafia bosses by detaining Russian IT workers. Just to rewind, a few days ago, Russian police detained several men of Azerbaijani descent as part of a murder investigation. 2 of those men died in police custody. Azerbaijan has since detained several Russians, including staff of a Russian state news agency. The paper claims that this is an unprecedented challenge to Putin. The president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, has launched his most powerful political attack on the Kremlin at a time when Russia is involved in an indirect military conflict with the collective West and a direct military conflict on the territory of Ukraine. It's clear that Ilham Aliyev believes that Putin and Russia in general are vulnerable and that his country is not. The Kremlin cannot afford to have too many things to deal with. For the Kremlin, it's vital to concentrate on its main task, in other words, on Ukraine. Although Azerbaijan's leaders are not openly criticising Putin, for now, in effect, this is a direct challenge to Putin and to the Russian leadership. How the Kremlin responds will have significant consequences for both Russian foreign and domestic policy. This opinion piece in Izvestia starts off by praising President Aliyev as an outstanding diplomat, but goes on to claim that in a growing conflict with Russia, Azerbaijan is vulnerable. Not so much because of how Russian citizens of Azeri descent may be treated. There are many reputable, respected and decent people among them in Russia. I'm talking more of the damage Russia could do to the oil and gas sector of Azerbaijan, both by restricting the possibilities for exporting oil and by carrying out direct strikes on Ukrainian oil infrastructure that belongs to Azerbaijani investors.
I will say that striking those oil facilities is probably the weakest threat of them all, because I really don't think that's something that would hold back. If the Azeris were to do something so bold, I don't think something like that is going to be the ultimate disincentive. But again, I don't think that they're going to make any really substantial move until there comes a moment of break of institution where it looks like that the Russians simply cannot control the situation. And I don't believe it has reached that point. But if tensions escalate, it isn't impossible for there to be some sort of confrontation.
Meanwhile, Kommersant reports Yerevan switches off Moscow. Armenia may stop transmitting Russian TV channels. Russia's relations with Kyrgyzstan seem okay, though. The Russian government paper Rossiyskaya Gazeta reports the Kyrgyz and Russian presidents met in the Kremlin and spoke the language of trust. And Nezavisima Gazeta looks ahead to the new academic year in Russia, which promises to be rich in experiments. In schools, there will be more emphasis on the moral, spiritual and patriotic component. From 2026, pupils from grades 5 to 7 will begin studying the spiritual and moral culture of Russia. At these lessons, children will be told about traditional values of various religions and about the lives of famous Russians. And attempts to strengthen discipline in senior classes will begin with an experiment on giving grades for behaviour.
Okay, one more. This is a really significant one. This is the Russian state media reaction to Donald Trump's administration cutting off, suspending aid to Ukraine for the second time.
It was their 6th telephone conversation this year. The Russian government paper Rossiyskaya Gazeta prints the Kremlin view of the Putin-Trump call, as shared by Vladimir Putin's foreign policy aide Yuri Ushakov. No progress on Ukraine, it seems. No sign of any compromise or concessions by Russia. The Kremlin leader made it clear that Russia will pursue its goals, addressing the root causes that led to the current situation, and will not back down. Now, when Vladimir Putin talks about root causes, what he means is that the West is to blame for arming Ukraine, NATO is to blame for enlarging up to Russia's borders. In his mind, none of what is happening is his fault. And Komsomolskaya Pravda leads with Russia will not back down. And just in case you missed it, Russia will not back down. To mark American Independence Day, the paper also publishes this multiple-choice quiz. There are various quotations here. You have to select the ones that Donald Trump actually said. The paper says you can do the quiz while Trump is clinking glasses of Diet Coke with his entourage and thinking about what to blurt out next. Several of the papers this morning write about the US administration's decision to pause some weapon supplies to Ukraine. Kommersant writes, in Russia, there was a positive reaction to the pause. Moskovsky Komsomolets writes that America had been handing out weapons and ammunition without thinking how much would be left for American troops. But now the canteen is closed, and the children will no longer be able to grab as many sweets as they want to. Same paper, different article. America's decision to cut military supplies to Ukraine could turn the tide in the fighting very soon. Our combat air force can now carry out strikes deep into Ukraine. Up till now, Ukraine's air defences have forced our jets to maintain a distance and use glide bombs. Izvestia, the Russian Foreign Ministry, expects a complete end to arms supplies to Ukraine. Ukraine is already seeking supplies through the back door via Europe. And this article caught my eye in Nezavisima Gazeta. It shows once again how, despite the tightly controlled Russian media landscape, it's not just good news about Russia that makes it into the newspapers here. This is a piece about how Moscow has lost its influence in Syria since the fall of President Assad. Damascus is not giving Moscow a place at the table to decide Syria's future. True, Russia still has its military bases in Khmeimim and Tartus, but this has more to do with retaining infrastructure than influence. The bases are isolated from the new system of government and not integrated into the logistical and political contours of the new authorities, as it was under Assad. Moscow seeks to preserve at least a bare minimum of political contacts as a symbol of involvement in Syria's future, but the Syrian authorities are displaying minimum initiative on this. What's more, Damascus doesn't conceal its displeasure at Russia's former alliance with Assad. In March, it sent an official request to Moscow for his extradition. The reality for Russia is that the new Syrian authorities view Moscow not as the guarantor of a better future, but as part of the past. Russia's external vulnerability creates an additional burden: the Ukraine conflict, pressure from sanctions, a fall in global political flexibility. This all limits Moscow's opportunities to actively compete for influence in Syria.
Okay. Also, the Danes have taken over the EU presidency, and after that, the Danish European Affairs Minister said that they want to ramp up Article 7 proceedings against Budapest, meaning pushing towards, due to Hungarian violations of EU laws, norms, rules, and regulations, their voting rights, which has some significance due to the fact that the Hungarians have been a key vote under the Fidesz government against aid to Ukraine, against Ukrainian European Union integration. Now, to be clear, while most European states are on board with Ukraine joining NATO, exactly how that process will take place has still yet to be agreed upon. The process has stalled for some time, and it is opposed by not only the Hungarian government, but also the Slovak government and the newly elected Polish president. So while the last Polish president, Duda, is saying, he's doing his best to convince him, that it's within Poland's interest that Ukraine joined both the European Union and NATO, and while, of course, the Polish prime minister is still in favor of Ukrainian NATO and EU integration, this does indicate, at least, that there are those who are pulling for far-right coalition support, which was the case during the second round. In order to get that people on your side, you're willing to make these types of promises on the campaign trail, which he has yet to back off of. So, it's not as simple as you just remove Hungary's voting rights and boom, now Ukraine can proceed with its EU plans. And there might be some other pressures that can bring down on Fico's government in Slovakia and the Law and Justice Party president. Of course, while he has some influence on foreign affairs, he is not all of the government. It's still something that shows that the EU presidency now has an interest in putting more pressure on the Hungarians than they were willing to before. There was a landmark ruling in Ukraine by a Ukrainian court recognizing that same-sex couples should be recognized as a family unit before the law, which could be used as a pathway for civil partnerships in the country and them getting many of the same benefits as straight couples when it comes to inheritance rights, when it comes to those burying their loved ones, like defenders who have fallen on the battlefield. Kyiv's Donetsky District Court has formally recognized a same-sex couple as a family, marking the first legal precedent of its kind in Ukraine, human rights organization Insight LGBTQ announced on July 3rd. Ukraine does not currently recognize same-sex marriages or partnerships, and this court ruling may serve as a critical legal milestone in expanding rights for their families. The case involves the Zora Kiss, the first secretary of Ukraine's embassy in Israel, and his partner, Timur Livchuk, who has been living together since 2013 and were married in the United States in 2021. The court ruled on June 10th that the relationship constitutes a de facto marriage, establishing them as a family under Ukrainian law. The ruling comes after Ukraine's foreign ministry refused to acknowledge his kid's family's Levchuk as Kiss's family member, denying him spousal rights to accompany Kiss on diplomatic posts to Israel. In response, the couple filed a legal complaint in September of 2024. So basically, the foreign ministry was telling him no, he could not have the right, his spouse could not have the right to accompany him to Israel. And he challenged that because they're family, and the court said, well, they are family. In its decision, the court cited both the Ukrainian constitution and precedents from the European Court of Human Rights, which requires states to ensure legal recognition and protection for same-sex families. Evidence considered by the court include shared finances, property, witness testimony, joint travel records, photographs, correspondence, and other documents establishing a long-term domestic partnership. A very big and important step towards marriage equality in Ukraine, and a very small victory in our struggle for a simple family happiness for Ukrainian diplomats, Kiss wrote on Facebook. News from Germany. The Germans are preparing a 25 billion euro, roughly translating into a little bit over $29 billion, for tank and armored vehicle purchases, which would equate to 1,000 Leopard 2s and 2,500 armored fighting vehicles. Those are vehicles which can both transport infantry, but as well as, is well protected and usually is armed with some sort of automatic cannon that can shred through tree lines. The Bradley, which America is actually phasing out, has performed quite well in Ukraine, both in delivering soldiers to the front line, on occasion maybe carrying some equipment, but also in suppressing suppressing enemy infantry, and even on a few occasions fighting with enemy armor. As, of course, that famous video of the Russian T-80 having its sights blown apart by the autocannon's fire by the Bushmaster was seen by people around the world. But now the Germans are preparing a new package in the midst of the commitment to spend 5% of the country's GDP on defense and defense-related expenditures. Germany is considering purchasing up to 2,500 armored fighting vehicles and as many up to 1,000 battle tanks as part of a joint European effort to create new NATO brigades to deter Russia, according to people familiar with the matter. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization has asked Germany to contribute as many as 7 combat brigades to the alliance within the next decade. The fighting vehicles and tanks, if approved, would equip these forces, people familiar with the matter said, on the condition of anonymity. The ramp-up reflects growing concern among allies about heightened Russian hostility since Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The order under consideration by Defense Minister Boris Pistorius and the Bundeswehr top generals would include as many 1,000 Leopard 2 battle tanks and 2,500 GTK Boxer armored fighting vehicles. The tanks are manufactured by KDNS and Rheinmetall, and the fighting vehicles are made by Artek, a joint venture of KDNS and Rheinmetall, both German defense procurement efforts with German defense companies. So again, this is nation states working on the national level to produce as much as they can. And look, I know I said there needs to be more general European cooperation. Germany does have one of the preeminent European defense manufacturers. So working with corporations like Rheinmetall and KDNS makes sense. But also, you cannot like snap your fingers and create integration overnight. So them working on the national level makes sense, and working to produce as much of an economy scale on the national level, if you're not going to do it on a continental level, making it doing your purchases in bulk to get more bang for your buck makes sense. But again, a German tank is much more expensive to produce than a Russian tank, and that's how the Europeans, though they're spending continent-wide 2 to 3 times more than the Russians, are having problems with deterrence. Might be actually going like 3 and 3.5 times. Oh, also, for those of you interested in, hey guys, defense procurement too crazy right now. There are congressmen proposing legislation to arm Israel with their B-2 bombers, which gives us quite a bit of diplomatic leverage over the Israelis, by the way, to destroy Iran's nuclear facility. So essentially, we would give them B-2 bombers, very expensive aircraft, which we don't have a tremendously large supply of. And then after giving them the B-2 bombers, they would be the ones that could pursue the continued bombing campaign on Iranian nuclear facilities. Mind you, that this is not a solution to actually stop the program. This is a solution to continue bombing the program and hoping that eventually the Iranians just give up and don't continue to pursue it anyway, and don't read it as a signal as to why they should have the program in the first place. But there is a program to give them these bombers. And when I say program, there's legislation. It has yet to be picked up and like ran with, but there are Congress people introducing that legislation. Okay, I think it might be time to get to the big beautiful bill. Or should we finish on foreign policy first? Do you think Israel will give us rare earth minerals? I don't know enough about Israeli rare earth minerals, but no. Okay. I think before we do this, I did want to actually watch this interaction between Maxwell Frost, who I believe is the youngest sitting congressional member. If he's not, he was at one point, or is at least now still incredibly young, if he's been replaced on that achievement. And he has a confrontation with a chairman of a committee when they were having a meeting about like tax and spending cuts. And Frost gets there's a lot of want in the base right now for fighters, and I think Frost wants to be seen as one of those fighters. And Hakeem Jeffries got a picture taken of him recent with a baseball bat talking about fighting the bill, and they're messaging that way. But Frost decides to swing for the fences with these Medicaid cuts, which are going to increase childhood poverty, and it is a tragedy that it is going to happen. And it's just, I mean, this is something that is going to happen. It's not a question. They can say, oh well, just fill out the paperwork. It's proven that bureaucratic overburdening, You know, people having to go back and fill out this paperwork every month. People not knowing they have to fill out the paperwork every month. You know, the reporting requirements do lead to less people getting Medicaid. Even if you wanted it just to be able-bodied working people that are truly going out there and looking for a job, if they're going to be able-bodied people. Not to mention the cuts to rural hospitals. It is going to affect people. If you're a rural kid who lives out in the middle of Timbuktu, or you know, our equivalent of Timbuktu, and a rural hospital shuts down, that's going to extend the amount of time it takes you to get to a hospital. So it is true that legislation is going to have a real effect on lives. I mean, legislation and policy, it can be talked about in the impact it has on citizens all across the country, and it can lead to deaths. So Frox decides to take that message and deliver it with, they say they're pro-life because they want the baby to be born and get shot. And the chairman of this committee starts slamming the gavel and does not take it particularly well.
Yeah, see, they say they're pro-life because they want the baby to be born, go to school, and get shot in the school. Die in the school, die on the streets. No. That is what they say.
I'm not going to say anything. You've gone over the cliff.
I moved to strike his words.
Over the cliff. Wait. You've gone over. We were going to be quiet, but you've gone over now.
I meant every word.
We are going to strike your words. But on the other hand, it might be good to leave your words. Might be good to leave your words. Because that's how you feel. But you are not going to come into this room and impugn our integrity. You will not.
I'm sorry. Just the look on his he just does not care. I didn't know what face we were gonna get back to, but he does not seem to care much.
We are pro-life people from conception to natural death. Most of us are.
What does that mean?
And don't you come in here and say, we want to preserve life so people can get shot.
That's what I've seen.
Are you through, Ms. Ledger-Fernandez? I hope so.
Well, Madam Chair, I want to thank all of our witnesses for coming in and laying out the distinct perspectives and approaches between how we believe this bill will affect Americans, their ability to get health insurance, which is essential to their ability to both live a healthy life and to continue to live. And with that, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I did make a motion that has not been acted on. If you would like for me to withdraw that motion, I will withdraw it.
Mr. Scott, I think it's better to leave those words in the
That's fine. Let's let them know how they feel.
Than to
Did not make a proper motion, just for the record.
You're withdrawing your motion. Thank you. Thank you. The panel is dismissed. Thank you very much.
Political tensions in the United States. Couldn't be better. Couldn't be better. Could not be better. And I will say that Republican messaging on the big, beautiful bill has just been god awful. I mean, look, Trump is using the big, beautiful bill through budget reconciliation to deliver on his campaign promises that he couldn't put through regularly because through like regular legislative process, because passing it with a lack of a clear majority is basically impossible. And so it has been a back and forth with the Senate parliamentarian about how much he can change and whether or not this is just finances moving around or they're trying to introduce new legislation through like kind of a different cloak saying it's budget reconciliation. And there has even been some cause to fire the budget parliamentarian in that process. But at the end of it all, after going through the House, going through the Senate, changing and going back to the House, with some Republicans saying that, actually quite a few Republicans saying that the process was so fast that they didn't really even know everything that was in the bill, including Marjorie Taylor Greene saying she would probably have voted against the bill if she knew that there was legislation saying you couldn't regulate AI for the next 10 years in any state, on states in the entire country on the state level. There would be a difference when it comes to rural hospitals. There were a lot of Republican holdouts there because the voters that have turned towards Trump in the last few days, the last few years have been lower income voters, ones that are on Medicaid where there are being cuts placed, and due to the bureaucratic burdening that is going to have an effect on them. There are cuts to rural hospitals, which have been drawn back slightly, but are still real because for the massive tax cuts that Trump are keeping into law and extending, for the new tax cuts that Trump is bringing into place, that money needs to come from somewhere. And that doesn't mean that all of his promises are being delivered. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt tweeted out, anyone who votes against the one big beautiful bill is voting against no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. But the thing is, and it even says in the added context right below it, there is tax on tips in this bill. There is tax on overtime in this bill, and there is tax on oversecurity. The majority of the tax relief is concentrated in wealthier income margins. While there is tax relief for some working people, there is some limitations on tax on tips that has to do with a cap. For example, limiting deductions to $25,000 when it comes to tips, meaning that if you get $25,001 in tips, and we're talking about a lot of service industry jobs where, you get more than that, where the majority of your income is coming from tips, that means you're still going to be paying taxes on tips. For no tax on overtime, well, it was capped at $12,500. For Social Security, well, this has no provision to remove taxes on Social Security whatsoever. That was just completely made up. And again, this is the press secretary lying 3 times in a row, completely flagrantly, but because our press meetings have like a 1 in 3 chance of looking like a North Korea style rah, go president, let me lick your boots. Not only are we embarrassed by the line, but we're embarrassed by the lack of pressure on the lying during these press meetings. And so rural hospitals are hurt. Medicaid cuts are real, and it's basically universally bipartisanly despised. Well, bipartisanly is not a word, but it's bipartisan that Medicaid cuts are bad. Not from everyone's perspective, but from the majority of Americans' perspective. And the Big Beautiful Bill is not popular. For the people who know about the Big Beautiful Bill, those who have heard about it, 2 in 3 people are opposed. Now, of course, there's a question about how much do people really know about the Big Beautiful Bill. There's a lot of people who don't know about the Big Beautiful Bill, and it's going to be the job of the Democrats to make sure people know about the impacts of the Big Beautiful Bill, which not only has these, cuts to services, but also increases deficit spending, increases the debt. And there was 2 scorings, and the Republicans were kind of holding out for the dynamic scoring because the non-dynamic scoring said that would increase the debt by like $2.4 trillion over 10 years. And then the dynamic scoring came out, which was supposed to include the increases in economic activity from the tax cuts, and it actually made the debt larger by further hundreds of billions of dollars. I think it actually went up to like $3.2 trillion over 10 years. So the Big Beautiful Bill has a lot of problems, and I don't believe it is either big or beautiful. And I believe if Republican messaging is anything like this, as many are nervous to defend it to their constituents, they're going to have some problems. especially as more people are going to hear stories of people who were kicked off of Medicaid because they forgot to fill out a certain paperwork this month, or because, they didn't understand the process, or because the website didn't work after trying to submit the paper 3 times. All real problems that people find when trying to deal with the bureaucracy that is trying to get healthcare with the government, and these type of restrictions that they're trying to place on it, and basing off of the system, because they're basing it off of a private system, off of a private option. I believe, I think it was a trial option done in North Carolina or South Carolina. 1 second. Healthcare trial modeled Medicaid cuts. One second. I'm trying to see if I can find the model. I can't find the exact model, but essentially what they're doing is they're denying care. They're trying to find more ways to put restrictions between people in that care. And the only way you're going to save money is not the way that that Mike Johnson describes. The way Mike Johnson describes it is, hey, we are sick of all these able-bodied workers sitting on the couch gobbling up my health care. So instead, we're going to tell them they have to go seek work if they want to get that health care. Mind you, that many of these people who are going to be denied Medicaid are going to be people who are seeking work, or could even be people who have jobs, but because, again, of the barriers that are being placed by the government, are going to have a disincentive to do so. And it has a real impact, and studies show so. If people try to submit a document 4 or 5 times on the government website and it doesn't work, or they have to do it every single month, people are going to end up without coverage. And when you say, oh, we're going to deny only the able-bodied people don't collect on health care. Able-bodied people don't have to go see the doctor. So when they say the able-bodied people are going to be the ones not covered, that's nonsense. Because it's not the able-bodied people who are going to have to go get medical help. So I don't think this message is going to work when these stories start impacting people that, Americans know.
Can I ask you, though, about the CBO score and the idea that 11 million, 12 million Americans may lose
I don't have
health
any faith and
insurance?
confidence in the CBO. They're scoring. They're wrong half the damn time. I don't give any. No,
So you're
I'm not worried
at
about
all
the CBO.
You're not worried at all that Americans may lose their health care?
Oh, well, just some Americans that aren't Americans, and that is the illegals. Why should illegals be on Medicare? Shouldn't have it. We did a great job with it all. We did a great job. I appreciate it. The American people spoke. The American people spoke, and
they said Medicaid cuts.
elected representatives spoke today. And what did we do? We supported and passed this one big, beautiful bill. So now you got to accept it and absorb it because it's the right thing to do for the American people.
Illegals. Again, when we're talking about the strategy here, they're not saving money by denying services to undocumented immigrants. They're saving money by denying services to people who either didn't fill out the paperwork or weren't able to deliver the paperwork on, after enough times on the website, or those, for whatever reason, were not able to prove to these standards that they were sufficiently seeking work in their mind. They can only save money on healthcare costs by denying care. And so it's not going to be surprising in the next few years when the amount of people covered by health insurance is going to drastically decrease in this country. And I think, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be like a 15 to 20% percentile, but it's going to be millions of Americans that are going to lose their health insurance. Okay. Also, I did want to give a quick shout out to Elon Musk. Because I got to say, Donald Trump, I've always given him a lot of flack for being a flip-flopper, for going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth on issues, but Elon Musk might be even better when it comes to criticizing the Trump administration in reference to the big, beautiful bill. With Elon Musk having come out against Trump, saying, hey, you're in the Epstein files. You know, I'm not happy with stuff that's going on. This big, beautiful bill is going to bankrupt the country. Then, after getting some pressure in reverse, Elon backed off and deleted his posts about Trump being in the Epstein files, deleted a bunch of his critiques of Trump, and he quieted down. But then, recently, as the big, beautiful bill approached passing, Elon Musk resumed his offensive, saying that he would back those who oppose the big, beautiful bill, and he would support the primaries of those who helped pass it, helped pass it. Then Elon Musk went on to take this poll from the Quantus Insights. Okay, Quantus Insights. I've always heard it. Who doesn't know of Quantus Insights? Okay, I have no clue if they're reputable or not. I'm going to just say that I am not one to trust these numbers on their face. But according to Quantus Insights, Elon Musk says 40% of Americans support Elon Musk starting a new political party called the America Party, while 38% don't support and 22% unsure. Mind you, there's probably a good chance that a certain amount of those people just like the idea of a third party, but also this is an America Party. That's very vague, isn't it? What are their values? What do they fight for? Who are their representatives? Are they just fighting for the interests of the richest man in the world? Or are they going to be, of a certain are they going to be grounded somewhere? There's no details. And I think as more details surfaced, and then, they ended up running some, SpaceX intern for congressional seats, maybe that support would go down. Not to mention all of the basic institutional barriers that Elon Musk is going to face, just like the Green Party face, just like the Libertarian Party face, just like any other third party faces. But Elon Musk responded to this saying, encouraging. Now, look, maybe Elon Musk is not serious about pursuing a third party. Pursuing a third party, honestly, is a fool's errand. But if Elon Musk was to pursue a third party, the Republicans losing enough votes to it to lose an election is not inconceivable. So it could be an example of Elon Musk trying to throw around his clout to some amount, saying, look, I can always jump ship. I spent $290 million on Trump's campaign last time. Why couldn't I just spend 300, 350, 400 million to start a new party and try to run candidates? Again, I doubt it would have much success, but it could still take away enough votes to hurt the Republicans. Kyiv City is back under air alert. I just checked it. It started again 18 minutes ago at 3:51 a.m. Earlier, it had stopped for a period of time after the air alert started about 7 hours ago in Kyiv region, 6.5 to 7 hours ago. Just giving you guys an update as I'm checking the air alert stuff. Okay, let's keep it moving. Let's keep it grooving. So Trump announced a trade deal with Vietnam. And let me just read you his post verbatim so he can give you the details and we can break it down. It is my great honor to announce that I have just made a trade deal with the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. After speaking with To Lam the highly respected General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam. It will be a great deal of cooperation between our two countries. The terms are that Vietnam will pay the United States a 20% tariff on any good and all goods sent into our territory, and a 40% tariff on any transshipping. In return, Vietnam will do something that they have never done before: give the United States of America total access to their market for trade. In other words, they will open their market to the United States, meaning that we will be able to sell our products in Vietnam at zero tariff. It is my opinion that the SUV, or as it is sometimes referred to, large engine vehicle, has anybody you know, not yourself, anybody you know, ever referred to an SUV as a large engine vehicle? Anyway, which does so well in the United States, will be a wonderful addition to the various product lines within Vietnam. Dealing with General Secretary Tao Lam, which I did personally, was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Okay, so there is no tariff for our goods entering Vietnam. So if the Vietnamese want to buy a Ford F-150 or an American large engine vehicle, the Vietnamese man could, if that man somehow had the money for it, because the standards that we build our cars to, the cost of labor, which is much higher than Vietnam. I mean, you got to understand, Vietnam is right next to China, which can produce quite cheap electric vehicles and could also produce cars that could be bought by the Vietnamese. Now, we have to ship our goods over an ocean and have higher cost of labor. So, the products that we're going to be able to sell into Vietnam are going to be limited to a certain section of society that is going to be higher earning. That doesn't mean that those people won't buy our cars, but even before this, the amount of tariffs on American goods were quite insignificant. And I don't believe that this reduction in tariff, which is going to amount to like 2 percentage points, is going to substantially increase the amount of Vietnamese people who will buy our vehicles or will now be able to buy our vehicles. And when it comes to the 20% tariff on all Vietnamese goods sent into the United States, we told American companies that we wanted to see them shift production from cheap consumer goods and other goods that, or especially goods that we were not excited about having to buy from China, to move their production lines to Vietnam. Those companies, of course, have been undercut. And with this 20% tariff, the goods that are not going to be able to be moved into the United States fast enough from Vietnam will have this tariff placed upon it, meaning it will be a tax on American consumers. And they're not going to be able to move these factories over fast enough. Even if all these companies, every single one, which they won't, some will make the calculation that they'd rather eat the 20% tariff than make the move, meaning that for those for those companies, what has been achieved is nothing more than a higher cost product for those who consume it. Even if there was companies that agreed to now move over to the United States, this is being implemented so quickly, and this is there's no like drag time of, oh, we'll wait 2 years, we'll wait 3 years, we'll wait 4 years, and we'll start with a 5%, then 10%, and 50%. There's no drag. There was no drag announced with this, meaning that they don't have enough time to even move over. If this was something that Trump even suggested to the public, like, hey, maybe if you want to move your manufacturing over, we can make out a deal. But with so many deals that have to be worked out, 90 deals in 90 days, which did not pan out at all, they don't have enough time. They simply don't have enough time expertise and have not put in enough effort to give that much detail to the deals that are being made, the few that are. Don't worry, guys. I'm sure Vietnamese villagers will be buying up Tesla trucks very quickly. I'm the fool. I just don't understand. Let's move over to the Middle East temporarily. I know we're currently under air alert, but there's war on many places in the country. By the way, in the world. I can show you guys the map of where there is an air alert. Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, Sumy, Poltava, Chernihiv, Zhytomyr, Klemensky, the Kyiv region, and Kyiv city, as well as parts of Cherkasy region. I believe even including the city of Cherkasy. Now let's move over to a report from Channel 4 about Hamas studying proposals for a 60-day ceasefire, which is also coming on the eve of a Haaretz report about U.S. contractors talking about their colleagues firing live ammo near Palestinians as they were trying to gather food for aid. And there's reports of hundreds of dead Palestinians at these aid points, many of them from bullet wounds.
A man picks his way cautiously through the debris of an Israeli strike, just as another hits. Even as hopes of a ceasefire grow in Gaza,
Ya Allah! اطلع شباب!
the bombs and the suffering continue. A series of airstrikes this afternoon in Gaza City, killing and injuring several Palestinians. Every day here, hospitals are overwhelmed. Patients treated on the floor. We were just sitting around, says this man. Then all of a sudden, 40 meters in front of us, we saw the buildings collapse. In southern Gaza, relatives gather to mourn yet more victims. Some killed by airstrikes, others shot whilst trying desperately to collect food for their starving families.
He went to get aid so he can get a bag of flour for us to eat. He got a bullet in his neck. The ceasefire will come and I've lost my brother. There should have been a ceasefire long before I lost him.
Everyone in Gaza, hungry, traumatized, is desperate for an end to the violence. Hamas is yet to officially respond to a renewed proposal for a ceasefire. But there is momentum behind diplomatic efforts to agree a 2-month pause in fighting, along with the staggered release of Israeli hostages and negotiations on a permanent end to the war.
Bring them home now!
Israel's Prime Minister is due in Washington next week. And today, outside the American embassy in Tel Aviv, relatives of hostages and some of those already freed called on President Trump to ensure a deal is reached.
This is our moment. The families are waiting. The 50 hostages are waiting. Please, please don't let this opportunity slip away.
In Washington yesterday, Trump met another former hostage and talked of his commitment to bring the remaining 20 still believed to be alive in Gaza back home. Just how much pressure is he willing to put on this man to achieve that goal? Many Israelis accuse their own leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, of prolonging the war for political gain. Visiting a kibbutz attacked on October the 7th, he insisted the hostages were his priority and does now seem more open to a deal. In Gaza, there's cautious optimism, but hopes have been dashed before. Israel broke the last ceasefire to continue, it said, targeting Hamas. Would any new deal end the same way? So many across this troubled region now praying for peace.
Well, joining me now is Daniel Levy, who's president of the US Middle East Project. He served as an Israeli peace negotiator during the premierships of Yitzhak Rabin and Ehud Barak, and is now an outspoken critic of the current Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu. Thanks for coming to the studio, Daniel. This latest talk of a ceasefire, trumped up by, yes, Mr. Trump, I mean, is there any hope of this actually sticking and happening?
Well, what's changed? Because Netanyahu is now saying, yes, we can try and make this work. And that's a shift. He's been the main obstacle. Hamas's consistent position has been, we can get a ceasefire if it's permanent. That's the first thing that has to be bridged. Netanyahu saying, no, we will continue to try to achieve these impossible objectives. Trump will have to try and bridge that gap. There's not going to be any ironclad guarantee. The other thing that's...
The thing is, if Netanyahu isn't willing to give up the obliteration and disarmament of Hamas, and Hamas isn't willing to give up their disarmament and, you know, them removing themselves from the Gaza Strip, then one side has to give way here. Either Israel has to live with Hamas's continued existence in the Gaza Strip, or Hamas as an organization has to essentially flee the Gaza Strip and give up its weapons before getting out of there, because they don't seem to have the military capacity to eject the Israelis without them withdrawing and agreeing to withdraw. And Israeli societal pressure has yet to this point to increase to a point against the war to make the government act in a withdrawal. And so the government has, up to this point, for over 600 days, heading towards 700 days, been of the belief that they can continue to apply pressure to Hamas, continue to try to destroy whatever weapons they have left, destroy any new recruits that they're taking up, continue to try to take up the newly elected leadership, and apply pressure to this organization that has already been in much disarray, not only since Sinwar's death, but before Sinwar's death.
Is Netanyahu's internal dynamics have shifted a little. He's looked at the post-Iran war environment and said, do I have early election options? Do I have other coalition options? Do I get a bounce if I now do this as well?
I will say that the political elements can't be ignored. With the American government participating on these strikes on Iran, they are able to hit the facilities and at least delay the program for some time. The atomic program. That doesn't mean it's stopped, but it does show a precipice to the back and forth conflict with the Iranians. And after 12 days, the Israelis got the better end of the stick for sure. So if there was a high note that Netanyahu was looking to end this confrontation on, this would be the high note. If he was looking for a positive jumping off point towards elections. That doesn't mean necessarily it'll be enough. Netanyahu was the security prime minister and is the longest serving Israeli prime minister in Israel's history. And having October 7th happen under your watch, and that just lack of response for so long, as locals were basically fighting for, you know, control of their towns from these glider attacks, is still something that is fresh in the mind of many Israelis. And I do not know if a bombing run on the nuclear facilities, the kicking in of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, and how the war in Gaza has continued to drag on is going to be enough to remove himself for that. Maybe that could be the bet he's making, but I'm not so sure.
Right. And I think more importantly, he says, what's my next move with Trump? Because an unprecedented thing really is going to happen in a couple of days' time. Netanyahu will make his third visit in less than half a year to the second Trump White House. And he's got to go there with something. And he sold this idea, partly to bring the Americans into the Iran war. If we do Iran, we change the whole region. To even give that a smidgen of credibility, and I don't think it's going to happen, he has to show some ankle. He has to suggest that he's ready to do something.
Show some ankle.
But why should anyone trust him? Because there was a ceasefire deal. It was agreed by, you know, through Steve Witkoff, by the Trump administration as it came in, by the outgoing Biden administration, by Hamas, by the Israelis, and then Israel broke it.
So exactly, there can't be trust. And Netanyahu is openly saying, we will continue.
according to polling I've seen, the public isn't going to be anti-war by any stretch anytime soon. Well, no, the Israeli public is anti-war, and I don't know what polling you've seen, but the majority of the Israelis want to see the war end, and they want to see the hostages come back. But the majority of the Israeli public also doesn't want to see Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And so these are two things that, from what Hamas has publicly said their position is, that cannot necessarily be achieved both at the same time right now through getting the Hamas to self-disarm, because it has yet to accept self-disarmament. So the question is, do you, from Netanyahu's point of view, do you choose ending the war and getting the hostages that are still alive home and the bodies of those who are not? Or do you keep adding pressure to hope that on the 700-day mark or the 800-day mark or the 900-day mark, that it'll be too much for Hamas to bear, it'll be too much for the Palestinians to bear, and then they'll offer a deal that's more amenable to Israel's interests?
Continue with this.
And Netanyahu's.
Ministers saying we will continue with the ethnic cleansing. So,
although they're not putting it quite like that, but that's what they do.
Well, the ministers quite openly talk about it, including from his own Likud often. So what one has to be suspicious of here is that Netanyahu's main play is blame game. Easy to get the Americans to blame the other side. His second option is a temporary ceasefire. He is rejecting the possibility of something permanent. Really hard are two questions. First of all, Israel has now removed Palestinians from 75% of Gaza, kettled them into these tiny areas, continues to bomb those areas. Israel will have to withdraw. The extent of that withdrawal is the question. And this question, if I may, of aid delivery. Sure. This is crucial. Israel prevented the UN and the standard humanitarian agencies from delivering aid. They put a starvation siege on Gaza. They then created this new agency, Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and consistently people have been killed at those centers. That is inhumane. That will have to stop. That's something the Americans will have to impose.
And what I don't understand, and perhaps you can help me, is why
do the Americans have to impose that? I can know why they should, but why do they have to, from the Trump administration's position? I mean, it's not a good look, especially Trump's the peace president. You know, that's his pitch. Especially since, you know, America is assisting the Israelis in many different ways and giving them cover. But from Trump's position, why does he have to cease the food blockade?
This has been allowed to happen at all, because the place is leveled, Hamas has been depleted, tens of thousands of civilians are dead, and since breaking the ceasefire, Israel is...
Because America is the only country that can leverage Israel. Well, no, I didn't say that they shouldn't. The question is, why would Trump?
Had a really tough time on the international stage as well. Even Trump has been fed up with it.
Without a ceasefire, I don't see the Trump administration making that pressure.
On occasion. So why are they continuing this? What's the continued threat from Hamas?
So there isn't one. Netanyahu's domestic coalition has partly depended on this, but more importantly, what you described there, Matt, in terms of the international pressure, it isn't felt because it's words. The Americans have expressed a bit of frustration, but at no stage have they said, end this, we won't provide the arms,
They haven't been frustrated enough, basically.
And in the UK, look at somewhere like the UK.
Yeah.
We've spoken a big game, but the Prime Minister here is apparently more interested in rolling back civil liberties in this country, the right to protest, spuriously designating groups as terror groups, than actually addressing how do I not be a bystander, how do I not be complicit in the war crimes being committed in Gaza. So actually, there isn't pressure. And unless there are sanctions, I'm not sure Netanyahu stops this.
And just briefly on the elections, I mean, you know, he's had a little bit of an uptick thanks to Iran. Do you think he's ready, as the ultimate survivor, to go back to the country and say, re-elect me?
Netanyahu always wants to keep his options open. He hasn't had enough of a bounce yet to take that risk. He knows he's a good campaigner. He knows he could catch the other side on the wrong foot. There's another factor to consider here, Matt. Ever since Netanyahu's cross-examination in the courts began in early June. He has not been happy at this situation. It's not going well. There are criminal charges against him. So if you want to understand what's going on, look at the domestic politics, look at what's going on in court, and look at the impunity. And then you'll get a sense of where Netanyahu might lean.
Daniel Levy, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Also, there was actually some footage released showing an Israeli attack on Tehran during Operation Rising Line, which is what the Israelis called their air campaign against the Iranians during the 12-day war. And this footage is pretty hard to watch. You can actually see, and I will give a content warning here, the Israeli strike lands straight in the middle of this group of cars on the left, throwing them into the air, and it seems to be a direct impact. Obviously missing whatever its target was, and damaging a bunch of what are seemingly civilian cars. And I don't believe the odds of survival for those at the impact point of that are high. There's a few cars that right at the front of it that made it, but very lucky. Missing? Well, I don't know if they're... I would think odds are that the goal wasn't this specifically what these collection of cars. Might have been one of these nearby buildings. What is this? This is not a war between political right wing and left wing. This is a war between Western civilization and barbarians. Okay, so there's a lot of people on this list that I am very confused about. Curtis Yerevan is the bottom right. Okay. Oh my gosh, there are some people. This is Uber online. This is Uber online. But according to this list, it looks like I am on here. You can see me right there next to Slavov Zizek and No Fuckers and Gloria Steinem. And according to this, I am more left than Bernie Sanders, Ayanna Pressley, Lorna Box, Justin Eric King, Vosh, Destiny, Benjamin Dixon, Edward Snowden, Timothy Snyder, Owen Jones. My goodness. I'm like all the way, but the last tile. But somehow David Pacman is more to the left than Justice Eric King. Really? This is a very interesting rating system. Very interesting rating system. Very strange. You are more left than Luke Skywalker. I know, isn't that crazy? Hope you voted yes on the new Elon party. Of course. How are we not excited? How could we not be? Not a rating system, it's a target list. Oh boy. No fuckers won't even use the word war. Can't he like not go home? Isn't he like in Georgia or something? No fuckers. Could have sworn. Could have sworn. Marilyn Manson is the central. I don't know why they ranked Marilyn Manson. Is Marilyn Manson particularly involved in Ukraine? Let me. Marilyn Manson, Ukraine. Please, I was thinking about giving an opinion, but I need to know what Marilyn Manson thinks about Ukraine. Well, I Googled it, and all I could find is Marilyn Manson saying that Kyiv made Moscow sound like their bitch after performing in both cities, and saying that the Kyiv audience was better. That's it. Well, like, why include Marilyn Manson? Very strange addition. Mercado seems to have been gone quiet, not streamed for days, too busy gaming. Yeah, I think he's playing Death Stranding too. You didn't answer my Odessa question from earlier. Did you get to go on the Ukrainian Navy ship in Maryland? No. I've only gone on Ukrainian Navy ships in the Black Sea. I have not gone on Ukrainian Navy ships anywhere else. If there was Ukrainian Navy ships in Maryland, I feel like I should have been contacted. I feel like I should have been a first person told. I don't know why I wasn't told there. Merc's on vacation? Oh, okay. Got you. That sounds nice. Hope he has a nice time. Is the air alert still on? Let me check if the air alert is still on. I do want to read this AP article, though. They want to get more details. Not in Kyiv City. In Kyiv region, there is still air alert, but not in Kyiv City. American contractors guarding aid distribution sites in Gaza are using live ammunition and stun grenades as hungry Palestinians scramble for food, according to accounts and videos obtained by the Associated Press. 2 U.S. contractors speaking to the AP on the condition of anonymity because they were revealing their employer's internal operation said they were coming forward because they were disturbed by what they had considered dangerous and irresponsible practices. They said the security staff hired were often unqualified, unvetted, heavily armed, and seemed to have an open license to do whatever they wished. They said their colleagues regularly lobbed stun grenades and pepper spray in the direction of the Palestinians. One contractor said bullets were fired in all directions, in the air, into the ground, and at times towards the Palestinians, recalling at least one instance where he thought someone had been hit. There are innocent people being hurt badly, needlessly, the contractor said. He said American staff on the site monitor those coming to seek food and document anyone considered suspicious. He said they share such information with the Israeli military. Video provided by one of the contractors and taken at the sites show hundreds of Palestinians crowded between metal gates, jostling for aid amid the sound of bullets, stun grenades, and the sting of pepper spray. Other videos included conversations between English-speaking men discussing how to disperse crowds and encouraging each other after bursts of gunfire. The testimonies from the contractors, combined with the videos, internal reports, and text messages obtained by the AP, offer a rare glimpse into the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the newly created secretive American organization backed by Israel to feed the Gaza Strip population. Last month, the U.S. government pledged $30 million for the group to continue operations, the first known U.S. donation to the group, whose other funding sources remain opaque. Journalists have been unable to access the GHS sites located in Israeli military-controlled zones. The AP cannot independently verify the contractor stories. A spokesperson for the Safe Reach Solutions, the logistics company subcontracted by the GHF, told the AP there have been no serious injuries in any of their sites to date. In scattered incidents, security professionals fired live rounds into the ground and away from civilians to get their attention. That happened in the early days at the height of the desperation, where crowd control measures were necessary for safety and security of civilians, according to their spokesperson. Look, if they simply allowed the aid to go in that is waiting on the border, then there being a crisis where they feel like it might be necessary at any point to fire at the ground, live ammunition, throw stun grenades at the gate, fire into the air. Maybe these instances would decrease if there was less people who felt that their family would die if they don't get another meal. It is getting to the point where children are facing the real fatal threat of starvation. And with military operations expanding and more evacuations being announced within the last 24 hours, the situation only seems likely to worsen. And so the need for that food to get in that is, again, waiting on the border only increases. I'm at the point where I honestly think deporting all the Palestinians from Gaza would be less effed. Well, no. Because if that happened, then it would basically just free up all these people to lose their homes. And then after they lose their homes, where do they go? I mean, Palestinians already make up such a gigantic portion of the stateless population of the world. Do we want to make the entirety of the Palestinian population stateless, besides those who still reside in the West Bank, the unsettled portions of the West Bank? And it's not like there was a 100% commitment to make sure that each person got back or had the ability to come back. I agree with you on this, Dylan. What they should do is a screening process and allow the convoys to go in. Look, search the convoys if you must. Make sure they're not bringing in bombs and weapons and stuff like that. But, I mean, people are starving en masse. They're starving. As that will lead to the process working better and less aid overall getting in the hands of Hamas. Whether or not they vet it or not, they should not be allowing children to starve. And at a certain point, you can only view it as them using starvation as a weapon of war, and they've been doing that for quite a while now. Why won't they let foreign independent journalists in to verify what's happening if they aren't committing a genocide? Well, because even if no matter whether they're committing genocide or not, everything you see on the ground in Gaza is horrific, and so the images will be bad. And there's a good chance that, you're going to get a lot of footage of dead kids from strikes that kill a lot of civilians, where they're willing to accept high civilian death rates, or at very least like a significant portion of deceased civilians, and it's going to be terrible for Israel's image, and so they would rather those images just not get out in the first place. And they don't want to read those reports of their bombs blowing up foreign journalists. Because again, bad headline. This is the ship you were talking about? The ship in Maryland. The Ukrainian Navy ship in Maryland that you were talking about. Well, you said this was in Maryland. This doesn't look like this is in the Black Sea.
No Russians in sight. We head out on a patrol with Ukraine's Navy in the Black Sea. Since the Russians were pushed back.
Yeah, like I did this. This is what I did in the Black Sea. I'm not gonna watch this video. I just did this. I just did this. If you want to see it, you can watch it on my channel when I release it. Okay. Is there any other stories any of you guys wanted me to cover? That the ship is from Baltimore, Maryland. Ah, okay. Well, I saw a ship from Sweden. I believe one of the crew that I actually interviewed did go to Baltimore, Maryland at some point. But that program had been shut down. I mean, it really, when you see how the Trump administration approaches it, you can just tell there's no real interest in helping Ukraine get in a good position to get a good deal, or quote unquote win the war, or get the best deal that it can, despite like comments about it. It's much more interested in seeing what the United States can kind of like get out of it. And there's not really like an end by which, like, how security structure looks in Europe, that it seems to be working towards, at least through like physical action, like defense procurement or aid assistance. In your opinion, what series is better, Band of Brothers, The Pacific, or Masters of the Air? I've only seen Band of Brothers, and it's good. I've never seen The Pacific. I'll look it up right now. Yeah, nope, never seen it. Maybe I will watch it, but I haven't seen it now. And Masters of the Air, haven't seen that either. Maybe I shall. Dylan, what's your favorite magical girl anime series? Pain. That comment fills me with pain. Dylan, did you guys ever get a bridge? I don't know what you mean by get a bridge. Oh, you mean the repairs for the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Yeah, one second. I believe so. Scott Key Bridge funding. Yeah, I think it should be. Yeah, should be still up. The Pacific is very good stories about Eugene Sledge and John Baseline, real Marine heroes. Okay, I'll watch it sometime. Okay. I don't have any other big, beautiful stories to cover at the moment. So I think we might wrap it up there. Because if we don't got anything other stories to cover, then that means I can cover other work that I need to get done. Script writing for my Pokrov's documentary, which is basically done. Not that it's done, as in, but I mean, like, the script is done, which it's a big script. If you guys want content, I have content for you. If you haven't seen my air defense documentary, I would appreciate if you did go check it out. It's very, time consuming to make these things. And it's free, available right now on YouTube. You can go check it out. The Ukrainian Anti-Drone Rodeo. It's pretty good. I think it's good. I think it's A-okay. You can watch the intro. Come here. There it is again. Drones. As I fail to fall asleep in Kyiv and find myself trying to pass the time by smoking and playing Bannerlord on my computer, the recognizable sound of Russian long-range fixed-wing drones slowly filled my ears as it approaches. It's as if a lawnmower was flying above your home and was closing in on my location, along with the apartments of many other civilians who may end up in the destructive pathway of these war machines. I've come to know that mind-numbing noise as the Iranian-designed Shahed kamikaze drone, which became the base design for later domestically made Russian models. It's how most Ukrainians interact with Russia these days, hiding in their corridors hoping that if it hits them, their family will not be burned and crushed. Those in apartments on higher floors like mine have worse odds. Those streaks of red dashing across the night sky is one of the few things standing between these drones and major urban centers, myself, and other neighbors huddling together waiting for the air attack to pass. Across the country, men and women have grabbed whatever guns they can get their hands on and set up teams to knock this threat out of the sky. On pickup trucks, on foot, or however they can chase them down or lay in wait for the swarm to come to them. With so much space to cover in the largest country entirely within Europe, they grab whatever they can get their hands on, even if it's a system old enough to be used by a soldier's father, or his father, or his. To get a better understanding of the Shahed rodeo that air defense crews find themselves in, I went to the Sumy region, a major route of attack for fixed-wing drones, to meet the cowboys ranching deadly Russian birds. Anyway, if you guys want to check that out, you can. I think it's pretty good. We're going to rate Gappy. If you want to support the channel, you can do it at DylanBurnsTV on Patreon to support more projects like this. Freelance war journalism does cost money. Gas costs money. Fixing costs money. My staff, they like to eat. Those heathens. I can't believe how disrespectful they are by doing that, but they do eat food. So if you want to support the channel, DylanBurnsTV on Patreon, or DylanBurns.tv is my website where you can donate and support the channel. You can also follow me on Instagram for daily or semi-daily. We post every week pictures from on the ground in Ukraine. You can read my work at offbeatresearch.com if you want to see some of my written work. Besides that, I hope to see you guys on Monday. Sorry that I was gone most of the week, as many of you know at this point, that I'm trying to spend as much time as I can on the front, and I do plan to head back to the front later this month, not towards the end, probably mid this month. I want to go out again the third week of this month, so that means, though, all of next week, you will get live streams, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, so do tune in for that, and I'm sure we're going to have tons of news as we wait to hear certainly as we wait to hear about the updates about air defense systems being sent to Ukraine. Anyway, see you guys later. Good night.